All right. Welcome. Episode 2 of the Mystical Mountain Podcast. My name is Chad, and I'm your host, and I'm here with Loren Lockman. He's the director of the Tanglewood Wellness Center in Costa Rica and has been coaching people to better health since 1992 and supervising water-only fasts since 1997. He's guided more than 10,000 people through water-only fasts averaging 24 to 25 days and has seen countless miracles over the years. Loren is completely committed to helping you optimize your health and well-being in every way, and we are going to also not just talk about water fasting, but about the Fruitarian diet, the diet for the human species. Okay, welcome, Loren. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Chad. Good to be here with you.
Indeed. Okay, so I guess I'll just start off with the most basic question of all. We'll start with
Sure.
we'll start with diet. Um,
Okay.
why do you think, in a nutshell, fruit is the most optimal food for the human physiology by far?
Well, there's actually so many things that it's not the simplest answer. Perhaps it's a simple question, but we can start with digestive physiology and anatomy. Every species has evolved over time to be adapted for a particular diet, and every species, believe it or not, is attracted to its natural diet. Right. So this may be hard to imagine, but I promise you, when a cow wakes up in the morning, not cows in factory, in CAFOs in North America, but cows here wake up on in a pasture, they look around and think, holy crap, I've died and gone to heaven. I'm surrounded by grass. It can't get any better than this, right? Similarly, if you think about what it is in nature that we're really attracted to, I don't think your mouth waters when you walk through a field of grass. I seriously doubt that your mouth waters when a bunny rabbit hops in front of you. The one thing we're really attracted to, and everyone is attracted to in its natural state, without us needing to do anything, prepare it in any way, is fruit. So first of all, that tells us something. There's actually a lot of things about our physiology and anatomy. We produce 1/10 as much hydrochloric acid, 10%, as the average carnivore. That's because we're intended to consume very tiny amounts of protein. We make hydrochloric acid. Stomach acid is specifically to digest protein. We create digestive enzymes to digest starches, and we have a starch splitting enzyme, even though we're not starch eaters, because fruit sometimes isn't fully ripe. When fruit is fully ripe, we don't really need much to digest it because it's already pre-digested for us. Uh, Fruit meets the body's needs better than anything else does. There are still people today. I had a conversation with someone on YouTube today who was trying to convince me that, we need to be eating a meat-based diet. Again, in addition to all of the huge anatomical and physiological differences between humans and true meat eaters, the fact is that science is really clear that the more protein we eat, especially animal proteins, the faster we age and die. The higher the rates of GI tract issues, cancer, heart disease. In fact, mortality from all causes goes up. And there's no justification for eating that diet. But, fruit meets our needs better than anything. It's got the perfect water we need. It's got all the enzymes and vitamins we need. It provides us with ample minerals, relatively small amounts. When the body's in balance, that's all we need. There's really, those, I guess, are you asked what was supposed to be a short question. So that was
Oh,
my long answer to the short question.
yeah, you can know. Feel free to elaborate as much as you want. I love the details. I agree with you on all that,
Yeah.
without a doubt. How long have you been fruitarian? And I'm sure your health has been great, but if you could just explain how's your health been for 30 years
Yeah,
since you've
sure.
been
Well,
doing
I'm
this?
I'm actually coming up on 30 years fruitarian, 29 and a half years now. Um, as you may know, my story, I'll give a very brief synopsis of it, but I came onto this path, as a lot of people do, I think, because my health had failed me, and it failed me at 23. I was 6 months out of school. I was going back one day for my 5th cup of coffee before lunch and realized that I had an addiction, and I wasn't willing to have an addiction. So I said, that's it, I'm not drinking any more coffee. It turned out that I had chronic fatigue syndrome and a host of other things: irritable bowel syndrome, chronic sinusitis, systemic candida, 57 allergies. And I was propping myself up with caffeine. When I stopped consuming caffeine, it became clear how sick I was. And after 3 years of getting worse with medical care, I finally realized something that I know you know, and probably a lot of your listeners already know, and that is that medicine can only ever suppress symptoms. That's all it's intended to do, right? I mean, first of all, healing is a biological process. So nothing can heal the body. And that, by the way, includes all substances. Nothing can heal the body except the body. So green juices don't heal the body, and smoothies don't heal the body, and superfoods don't heal the body, herbs don't heal the body. The body heals itself. I realized these things, and personally, after realizing that I became allergic to everything, I found fasting, and it was as a result of fasting that I began to feel what my body actually needed. And it was interesting because I had become allergic to many fruits and vegetables. It was only after fasting that I was able to handle them and tolerate them again. So, yeah, I mean, huge changes, huge things shifted for me. And this was, I got sick. Let's see, I'll be 60 in a month, just over a month. It's the 26th. My birthday is the 2nd of May. So 5 weeks from now, I turn 60. I got sick when I was 23. It was 37 years ago. And it was 3 years later that I took matters into my own hands at 26. So 34 years ago. It took me about 6 months to get my health back. And it's interesting because I was in the commercial real estate business. I had no intention of doing anything else. I thought I'd found something I really resonated with, something I enjoyed. But the changes in me were so dramatic that people who knew me would come up to me and say, "Oh my God, you look amazing. What did you do? Can you help me? Or can you help my kid? Or can you help my parent? Or can you help my spouse?" And I think everybody wants to help. I think that's just a natural human tendency. We want to help other people if we can. So I was glad to help people, and I started sharing everything I could. And by the way, I was far from an expert at that point, although I started studying nutrition at 14. So by the time all this occurred, I'd already, was 12 years into this study of health and nutrition. But I still didn't know that much. I don't know if you've heard this before, but someone once said, "In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king." And I was the one-eyed man. I didn't see that well, but I saw better than most people did.
Nice.
And yeah. And so, what shifted for me was amazing. In the 34 years since then, I haven't been sick a single day.
Wow.
And I think it's important to understand. People tell me, especially the haters on YouTube, tell me how old I look, probably because of the gray. And I really don't like shaving very much. So I've thought, I did when my beard first went gray, started to go gray, I shaved it off. I had a black beard for many years and jet black hair. I say my hair is still black. It's just a lighter shade than it used to be. But it's completely genetic. And, this people are going to want to argue with this. I have a young woman here now. There's a couple from Lithuania who's doing some amazing video work for us. And they're staying with us for a couple of weeks while they work on the project. And I asked her the other day, we were at these beautiful waterfalls a couple of days ago. She has this beautiful jet black hair. And I said, "Is that your natural color? It's almost blue black. It's so black. Is that your natural color?" And she said, "No." She says, "My hair is the same color as yours." And she's 29, I think. She said it went completely gray by the time I was 25. Now, in my case, my siblings and I all started to develop gray hair by the time we were 14 or so. But if I have that in my genes. The rest of my family, I've got 6 siblings. They all wear glasses. My vision's still better than 2020. I don't own a pair of glasses. My younger sister had her knee replaced last year. She's waiting to get the other knee replaced. My body literally works better today than it did at 18. Ironically, when I was in the mountains close to where you are, maybe, I don't know where you are. That's where
British
you're in
Columbia.
BC. Okay. So I was at
Yeah.
the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. When I started to develop, I started to show the effects of a congenital knee defect that I had. I wasn't aware of until I was 18. It started to become a problem at 18 while I was a cadet there. And in fact, I wound up leaving the Air Force Academy because I was disqualified from flight training because of it. The Air Force wanted to operate on both my knees. And you're too young to remember this, but this was back in the 1970s. And back then, basketball players and baseball players would get knee surgeries, football players, but they would get surgery like every 2 years. They would go in over and over again. I was like, there's no way I'm letting anyone cut my knees open. And if I can't walk, maybe I'll think about it. But until then, not a chance in the world. So back then, we were in Colorado Springs. I would ski as much as I could, but I had to wear big braces on both knees with metal hinges. At 55, I grew up with friends who surfed. I was a competitive swimmer and body surfer from the time I was about 6 years old on the Atlantic beaches. I grew up in Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C. And we would go to Delaware and Maryland beaches, and I'd surf even after hurricanes. They'd clear the beach. They'd tell you couldn't swim. My sisters and I would go in anyway. But I decided at 55 to try surfing a surfboard. And I don't do it so often now because I don't have a surfboard and prefer to not have to carry anything. But I can surf the same action as skis. And at 60, I don't need the braces I needed at 18. So when I say my body works better, it literally works better than it ever has.
That's amazing. I don't doubt that necessarily. I mean, in my own experience, I'm not 100% raw, although I'd like to be. Granted, maybe I'm making excuses, but it's a little more difficult here than in the tropics, with
Certainly.
the incredible fruit. But I've noticed since I've made the huge dietary changes, like I've told many people, like I'm a basketball player, and the recovery is probably the biggest thing I've noticed, where not only do I feel like I can go for quite a while in the gym just on mainly fruit, which is counterintuitive to what a lot of people
Yeah.
think, but I also feel like the next day after a workout or I'm going up a mountain, I can do it all again, and I'm not even sore. It was pretty incredible when I first noticed that.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting point, and it's actually a point that was made. I think it was nearly 30 years ago that I was on the board of the Vegetarian Society of Washington, D.C. I'm a 35-year vegan, and even back then, the research showed that vegan non-athletes had faster muscle recovery time after working out than non-vegan athletes. You would think, well, the athlete is doing this all the time, they probably recover quickly. Not if they're eating animal products. And of course, you've noticed the difference with cooked foods as well. I did too. And I mean, I won't. I've always believed in being transparent. So over these last 29 and a half years, there have been times when I've eaten some cooked food. Every time I've done it, though, my body has said to me in no uncertain terms, "You're an idiot, and you shouldn't have done that. And now you're going to suffer." And I feel worse. I feel less energy. My temperature goes up. There might be more mucus. I just don't feel as good. Normally, I have
Yeah.
incredible energy every single day, and it never changes.
One thing I was going to ask you maybe to briefly touch on, you mentioned something pretty interesting that a lot of people don't realize when you said that the only thing that heals the body is the body.
That's
Because
right.
a lot of people, even vegans, raw vegans, fruitarians, whatever, they do believe, and I kind of do too sometimes, that like, well, these foods are so good for us. How are they not at least helping us heal a little bit?
Well,
Maybe,
right.
yeah,
I mean, I think the way to think about it is a little differently. Um, I mean, obviously, the foods, fresh fruits and soft, tender, leafy greens. Basically, my diet, as you probably are aware of, consists of fruit and simple green salads, and usually not much more. I mean, every once in a while. I was recently in Tulum, Mexico last week, and there's a raw vegan restaurant there, Raw Love, and I had a meal there, and eat some more elaborated raw vegan food, stuff I don't usually eat, and felt the impact of that afterward. But when we're eating nature's perfect foods for our bodies, certainly they're good for us, but that doesn't mean they're healing us. I really believe that the very best that food can do for us, excuse me, is to meet all the body's needs for water, fiber, nutrients, all the various nutrients, without creating a problem for the body. So if we were to look at a continuum of all possible dietary choices, there is an optimal diet. Every species has a natural species-specific diet, so do we, and it's never cooked, ever, in nature, right? It's never processed. Animals don't use machines. We don't either. People say, but I can't, like, we need to juice this to be able to use it, like wheatgrass, wheatgrass juice. We can't digest grass, and so people make a juice from it to get the nutrients. But the simple fact is that if we can't digest grass, we don't need to consume it, right? Everything we need is part of our natural diet, and we don't need machines, processes to be able to get to it. Mm-hmm. So foods provide us with everything we need, and having everything we need helps the body heal. I mean, it's hard for the body to heal perhaps if we don't have everything we need, but when you think about this idea that food heals us, again, consider the fact that every species in nature, when sick enough or badly enough injured, will lie down and stop eating. Mm-hmm. Their perfect diet isn't healing them. They instinctively know to stop eating their perfect diet as soon as the body needs to heal in any way.
It's all about freeing up energy, right?
That's right, exactly. The body is self-healing, and it takes energy to heal. And this is why we literally see what most people in medicine would call miracles here all the time, including 100% success eliminating hypertension, 100% success eliminating type 2 diabetes, high rates of success with Lyme disease and multiple sclerosis. I have a volunteer here now in her mid-30s who was diagnosed as being epileptic when she was a girl. And she fasted with me 6 months ago for the first time, 21-day fast, had her first clean brain scan, which says she no longer has epilepsy. That's incurable, supposedly.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, I have another. In fact, I'm sure you've seen my videos. It's probably why I'm here today. Mm-hmm. The woman who's been producing them for me the last couple of years, you probably noticed the quality went way up. Yes. The last couple of years. Gazelle, who came to me as a client 5 years ago, at the time was living in Pittsburgh, went home, wound up changing her living situation. She and her husband went separate ways, and she came back to fast a second time and never left, and has been producing all my videos for me, doing all the recording, editing, everything for the last couple of years. She's a type 1 diabetic, or was a type 1 diabetic. I mean, again, this is a condition you can't heal from.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that.
Well, she does still take insulin, but she just had 2 weeks ago had her A1C tested. According to that, she's no longer diabetic.
That's amazing, because I've heard a lot of successful stories of type 2s with the raw foods diet and the Fruitarian diet, but I've heard how type 1s have definitely benefited hugely more than other diets, but I haven't heard that there's a test suggesting that maybe you don't even have it anymore.
Yeah, it's basically where your A1C is. If A1C is where it should be, then apparently you're okay. I mean, she does still find that, where you and I can eat. I mean, I can eat 3 kilos of watermelon at one time, or 3 or 4 giant mangoes and be perfectly fine. Her blood sugar does still go up, and so she does still use insulin. Now, this just happened a couple weeks ago, and she's maybe hasn't quite figured out what to do about that. But even over the last couple of years, I mean, when she came to me 5 years ago, by the way, she wasn't aware she was a diabetic. She had her natural instinct was to avoid doctors, and she had never had her blood sugar tested at 28 or 29, 27 maybe. She got here and I tested her blood sugar, and every day it was 275 to 300. And I was like, that's not okay. You're eventually going to lose your eyesight, your feet, you're going to have serious problems if your blood sugar is that high all the time. It took me about a year to convince her to go to get her blood sugar tested. And sure enough, they discovered that she was, as was obvious already, that she was a type 1 diabetic. So she's been using insulin now for several years, but she uses about 15 to 20% as much as the average person would have to use given her size and what she's eating. So fasting and this optimal diet we're talking about has allowed her to do this. And the irony is that most people imagine, someone arguing with me today on one of my videos and said, fruit, it spikes your insulin. No, actually it doesn't. It doesn't spike your insulin because fruit contains fiber and water, which slow down the absorption of sugar. Remove the fiber and water, you've got a problem. So orange juice has 3 times the glycemic load of oranges. Okay, raisins have 3 times or more, probably 5 times, maybe 10 times the glycemic load of grapes, because you've taken the water out, and so the sugar is more concentrated. Being fruitarian doesn't mean we live on dried, figs and dates. Some people do, but that's not, not very healthy.
Should there be a distinct clarification for people on the difference between the glycemic index and the glycemic load? Because people always put so much importance on the index.
That's right. And, it's interesting because you can go watch 10 experts talk about the glycemic index on YouTube. And I don't know that any one of them actually knows what they're talking about. They still talk about it as if it's talking about the effect on your blood sugar. It's not. The glycemic index, which is way more well known than the glycemic load, is nothing more than a description of how quickly a substance makes its carbohydrates available to the body. In other words, watermelon, for instance. Watermelon has a glycemic index of 72. They used to say that anything over 70 was high. Now they say anything over 50 is high. But watermelon is 72. And so what does that mean? Does watermelon have a lot of sugar? No, it's mostly water. It's 92% water. How much sugar can there be, right? It's not that there's a lot of sugar there. It's that it's so easy to digest. When a watermelon's ripe, it's mostly water. It's so easy to digest. It doesn't have a lot of fiber. It's not, what happens is the body easily digests it, and so the carbohydrates are easily absorbed into the body. But because there aren't very many, and so at 72 means those carbohydrates are available quickly. It took someone several years to realize, but this doesn't make any sense. I was saying that from the beginning. This doesn't make any sense. Why would we pay attention to this? Yeah. What we need to do is take a look and see, okay, how quickly are they released and how much is there? And that's what glycemic load does. It takes the glycemic index, which is how quickly they're released, and multiplies it by the percentage of the food, which is sugar. How many grams of sugar is there in 100 grams of the food? So if there are 10 grams, it's 10%. Then they're going to multiply those two things, and that gives us the glycemic load. Watermelon has a glycemic load of 3 or 4. I forget if it's 3 or 4.
And what's that comparatively, let's say, with something like pasta or something?
Well, pasta probably depends on what type of pasta, but typical, normal wheat pasta is going to be somewhere in the 20s. And to make it clear what this means, because it's a different range completely in the glycemic index. Right, I mentioned the glycemic index today. Anything over 50 is considered high. On the glycemic load chart, 0 to 9 is low, 10 to 19 is moderate, 20 and above is high. So virtually all breads, all grain products, all pasta, pretty much all processed foods are going to be in the 20s or higher. And coming back, even dates, natural foods like dates or raisins can be as high as 40 or more. Very high glycemic load because you've taken all the water out. A raisin is 20 to 25% water. A grape is 82 to 84% water. By taking the vast majority of water out of the thing, the sugar is now much more concentrated, and that's going to have a huge impact. But when we're eating fresh fruits, think about some of the sweetest, juicy fresh fruits, like mangoes, pineapples. They're both in the low range.
Yeah. It's incredible.
So, it's, for most people, now there are people, again, if your body is very insulin resistant, which is type 2 diabetes,
Yeah.
right? So type 2 diabetes, as you said, yeah, that heals easily. Well, it does. It's actually really easy because over 90% of the time, it's directly related to obesity.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I was going to ask you about one thing, it comes up a lot with people I know or others, is that they'll say, why should I eat a bunch of fruit or whatever? Like, lentils and beans, they have so much more amino acids, or they might point to vitamins and minerals in certain foods,
Right.
and they do. But if you could explain why more doesn't necessarily mean better.
Yeah, well, I mean, more, and I mean, it's funny because that's the line I use, that we tend to believe in our culture that more is better. It doesn't mean that at all. What we want to do ideally is meet the body's needs without exceeding its needs. Now, to clarify, we might need to eat, might need to eat more than the body needs in order to get its needs met, because we're never 100% efficient, right? So if the body needs, let's say 20, I'll just make up silly numbers. Let's say the body needs 2 grams of something, then we might need to eat 3 or 4 grams to get that. But if we can get it with 3 or 4 grams, it doesn't help us to eat 8 or 10 or 12 grams. Okay, now we're just making the body do more work to get rid of the excess, which is what it's always trying to do. Get rid of whatever it doesn't need right now. And so, yeah, people do, believe, many people, that first of all, we've been led to believe that we need large amounts of protein. And I don't know if you've heard that story, how they came about, but many people maybe
I forget.
haven't.
Go ahead.
Sure. Well, I mean, it was 100 plus years ago when the United States Department of Agriculture had been tasked with the job of determining recommended daily allowances. I think they were called something else back then, but it was how much of each thing should we consume. And so they set out to figure out how much protein should we consume. Now, you're an intelligent guy. If you wanted to figure out how much protein someone needed, what would you do? How would you work that out?
Well, I never hear of anybody even becoming protein deficient. It's like non-existent unless you're actually starving. So
it's almost impossible to do unless you're not getting enough food.
As long as you're getting enough calories, right?
Exactly. It would be almost impossible. And that's because our protein needs are so tiny that it would be, now, let's say you want to be a bodybuilder, right? You want the biggest muscles possible. Okay, if you want to create unnaturally large muscles on your body, then you might need to consume more protein. Now, we should be clear that bodybuilders don't live very long. It's not a very healthy thing to do. But if that's what you wanted, then you'd have to consume an unnatural amount of protein to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And the bodybuilding community, the athletic community, and our just world community in general are just grossly over exaggerating how much protein we need no matter what we're doing.
Absolutely. And again, this all started with this USDA thing. What they did, if it were me and I was trying to figure it out, I might have, within ethical limits, I might have tried putting people, groups of people on different percentages of protein for some time to see how they fared. Okay, or I might have tried to calculate somehow, based on the human body and what's going on, how much we needed. But they didn't do any of those things. What they did was they looked to see how much protein a rat needed to thrive. Right? Now, chances are good that the vast majority of people listening to this broadcast are not rats. And they might be, people may think they're rats, but they're not rats. Rats grow much faster than we do. Their protein needs are much higher than ours are. Determining what a rat needs doesn't really help us that much. And once they had determined what the rat needed, then they decided that to be safe, because they didn't want people to be protein deficient, they would double it. And then the final piece was that the lobbyists from the meat and dairy industry came calling and said, hey, do us a favor. And they said, sure. And so they doubled it again. Okay. So the RDAs for protein, which pretty much every country now, most countries use, were set by the USDA 100+ years ago are 4 times what a rat who needs more protein than we do needs to thrive, right? And what's happened since then is, I think it was 2013, there was a study published which proved something I've been saying for 30 years, which is that excess protein makes us age and die faster. It makes us sick.
Hard on the kidneys, right?
It's hard on the kidneys and a lot of the rest of the body. And one of the ways, it was probably 15 years ago now, someone discovered that the DNA, which is this double helix, right? It's this twisted strands. I don't know if you've ever done any wiring.
No.
I wired my own first house myself. Somehow survived that whole process. But you've probably seen a wire nut.
Yeah.
Right. So you can take 2 wires, take a pair of pliers and twist them together. And then you take a wire nut and screw it on. You clip it off so it's just a little bit and screw this wire nut in to hold it together. Turns out that we have something like a wire nut on our DNA. We have these strands that are twisted together, and there's something called a telomere, which is like a little protective cap that prevents it from unraveling in the same way the wire nut does. And telomeres start out when we're young, very long. And as we age, they get shorter and shorter. And as they get shorter and shorter, we're aging. So you can measure someone's telomere length and see how much life they have. It's actually really predictive. What's been proven now is that the more protein we eat, especially animal proteins, which are more complex and difficult for the body to break down and have, they tend to be more acid forming. What happens is the telomeres get shorter. So we see higher rates of disease and faster aging and death by consuming more protein. Most people, are thinking about, the question I've been asked now for 35 years, I'm sure you've heard it too, well, where do you get your protein? Right?
It's the most asked question.
Exactly. And the answer that surprises people is from watermelon and papayas and everything else I eat. But what I eat most here is watermelon and papayas. I have watermelon probably 5 times a week and papayas probably 3 times, 4 times a week. So I had 2, big, amazing papayas today for breakfast at 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Not a lot of protein, but all the protein we need to stay strong and healthy. We don't need any more than that. More than that is just a burden on the body.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about a couple little things. So, some of the things people will often bring up to me. And because there's so many articles out there, so much information, and I don't believe this stuff. But for example, iron gets brought up a lot. So some people say, there's heme iron versus plant iron. Some people say that plant iron is harder to absorb. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's true. I don't think that's not an opinion. I think it's absolutely true. We absorb more heme iron than we do iron from plants. But the question is, it's the same question that comes up with around raw food. So a lot of people say, well, you absorb more lycopene from a cooked tomato. Okay, true. But who's to say we should be getting more lycopene? Remember, more is not better. Okay, we don't want tons of iron. Getting lots of iron makes the body actually sick. So what we want to do is get what we need. We can easily get what we need by eating plants and getting the iron from plants. This is something we should never need to think about. And go ahead.
I was going to say, some people claim that we don't get enough iron, or we don't get enough of certain things, and I would gather that could also be because of the bad habits people have been doing throughout their life. Their body is congested with all sorts of things. Yeah,
no question about it. In most cases, the issue, my opinion, is that the issue is not about consuming more. And there's some fairly clear examples of this. For instance, as a vegan or vegetarian, or someone who's hovering around that community, you're going to hear that vegans and vegetarians have to take vitamin B12, right? Because vitamin B12 is present in all animals and all bodies. But if you're eating plants and no bodies, how are you going to get your B12? Well, the question is, how do the animals, because the needs from humans to other species aren't that different. So how do the animals who don't eat other animals, and there's many of them, Where do they get their B12 from?
The plants they eat,
Well,
or the bacteria or whatever hanging around everywhere, or do their bodies even produce some of it? I've heard some people say that they think our bodies produce a certain degree of
oh
B12.
yeah, let me be absolutely clear about this, because this
Hmm.
isn't an opinion. This isn't something that we think. Science has been clear for decades that B12 is produced by, I mean, first of all, B12 is only produced by bacteria. Okay. Now, not all bacteria produce B12, but it's shocking for many people to realize that while it's been estimated now that we have roughly 70 trillion cells in the body, it's also been estimated that we have roughly 700 trillion bacteria living in the body, 10 times as many bacteria as your own cells. In your gut, okay, in the intestine, we have what's now called the second brain, right? The gut biome. And the gut biome is made up of 10 trillion bacteria. Okay, 10 trillion bacteria, which weigh about 3 pounds, same size as your brain. It's called the second brain. And they produce all the B vitamins every day. All the B
I didn't
vitamins
know.
are being produced there. Okay, now science has been clear about this for decades. What they used to say is that, yeah, but we can't absorb the B12 because it's destroyed by the acidic environment. So we're not able to get it from there. Now, over just the last maybe 3 to 5 years, there are scientists who have begrudgingly begun to say, well, it appears that some people can get the B12 from their own gut biome. That's where every non-meat eating species gets B12 from their own bodies. We don't need to consume it. It's being produced in the body. Now, a lot of people are decimating their gut biome, their bacteria in their body all the time. And they do this by doing things that they think are healthy, and some things they probably know aren't so healthy. You know, today, even 40 years ago, yeah, 30 years ago, if not 40, medicine was saying that childhood ear infections had become a huge problem. Why? Why was it such a problem? Any idea?
Um, Not off the top of my head.
Let me take a look at the top of your head and see if it's up there.
Right there.
No, it's not there. Um, the reason why is because of the overuse of antibiotics.
Okay.
Antibiotics, anti against, bio-life. Antibiotics are intended to kill bacteria. The problem is we're not just hauling around 700 trillion bacteria for no reason. We need them. We have a symbiotic relationship with them, can't survive without them. They're actually providing us with much of our body's immune function. Okay, their job is to consume dead and dying tissue. We need them there.
Hmm.
Okay, but what happens when people take antibiotics? Well, they're destroying the bacteria in their body. What
Yeah,
happens when, go ahead.
I was going to say, related to the antibiotics thing. Um, Even a lot of vegans, they think, oh, now I got to after I take the antibiotics, I got to take a ton of prebiotics and
Probiotics, right? Or
sorry,
probiotics. Yeah.
yeah, probiotics.
Well, there's both. There's both. Yeah.
And so my intuition is that you don't need to do that if you're eating properly. What do you think
Oh,
about
exactly.
probiotics?
Well, I mean, again, the research is pretty clear that at least the majority of it, and there's always some dissenting voices who disagree, but the majority of the research seems to point out that most people don't benefit from taking probiotics. And that's because bacteria reproduce really easily, okay, rapidly. You take 2 bacteria, put them in a petri dish. Okay, maybe you need some candles and soft music, a bottle of wine, but the next morning there's going to be like a lot of bacteria in that petri dish. They're going to be reproducing all the time. Okay, so it's pretty hard to destroy all the bacteria in the gut. It's pretty hard to do that. If you destroy them all, then you might benefit from some taking probiotics, but it's a tiny percentage of people who do that. With fasting, for instance, we see people all the time who supposedly have these huge problems because of their lack of gut flora. And what happens when they fast? By the time they're done and they finish their feeding process, there's no problem anymore. It's
Hmm.
resolved itself. Okay, it's not something we
Yeah.
need to mess with. Again, one of the things that I'm probably most famous for saying over and over again is that every time we manipulate the body, we're creating unintended negative side effects. We don't have to try to make the body do anything. What we want to do is intelligently get out of its way. And this,
Yeah.
this brings us back to fasting. What makes fasting so powerful? I mean, if we start with the idea that the body, that
Your internet
healing
might
and
be
cleansing
slowing
of
down
the
just
biological
slightly there
process.
for
It
a second.
allows out of our amazing body's way so it can put as much energy as possible into cleansing and healing. Those things that only the body can do anyway. It can do much better if we're not eating food.
Mm-hmm.
Because this energy, roughly 50% of the body.
I think we're losing a little bit of your audio there, Loren. It might be a bit of a lag happening there for a moment. Um, yeah,
That would
I
have been
can't
used
hear
for
you at the
process of the
moment.
body.
Let's see here.
Back.
Okay, let's see if that fixes it. Okay, I can hear you now. I can see you
Okay,
good.
good. Yeah, we'll hook up there.
Yeah.
Editing, I guess.
Maybe I don't think it'll come through in the finished audio. If you want to repeat that last 30 seconds or so.
Sure. Where do you think we want to start?
Well, whatever you were saying the last 30 seconds about the probiotic
I
and
never
whatnot.
pay any attention to what I say.
Okay.
Yeah, what I was talking about was the fact that because it's so difficult to destroy all the bacteria in the gut, and because these gut flora, the bacteria, reproduce so rapidly and readily, it's very few, unless you've destroyed them all, you're not going to benefit from probiotics, and it's pretty difficult to do. What we see is that when people fast, it happens all by itself. It happens by itself because we're simply getting out of the body's way and letting it do what it needs to do. And this, again, this is why we see so many incredible benefits across the board. I mean, and this is surprising with people. Like, I mean, at least 3 times a day, on whether it's on email or Facebook or YouTube or Instagram. I'm probably missing some other places. Someone's going to ask Skype. Someone's going to say to me, "Will fasting help with fill in the blank, whatever the condition is?" And my response is always the same. If your body can heal, fasting simply allows you to get out of your body's way so it can heal as efficiently and as effectively as possible.
Mm-hmm. And did you want to briefly touch on some people's criticisms of water fasting as the whole metabolic damage thing?
Right, which is a fiction. There's no such thing as metabolic damage. You're not, I mean, this is nonsense. And again, I mean, this starts with a huge, what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, most people, I think, are starting with the wrong paradigm, with the wrong idea. Okay. You can listen to 20 blogs and read 50 articles and watch 20 television shows on health and often weight loss, because most people are now overweight or obese. And what they're always telling you is how you can raise your metabolism. Okay. Now, why does everyone want to raise their metabolism? Because if you raise your metabolism, you lose weight eating the same amount of food, or even better, you can eat more food without gaining weight, right? And that's what people want to do, is figure out how to eat more or lose weight.
Yeah.
But let's look at this from a different perspective. Okay. You have a car.
Yep.
Can I ask you what you drive?
Yeah, it's Toyota, like a SUV style.
Okay. 4Runner or one of the bigger ones, like a
4Runner.
Okay, all right. So your 4Runner, I'm guessing on the highway, probably gets 27 miles your kilometer land.
Yeah, I forget the exact difference.
That would be around 40 kilometers to the gallon, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
it sounds about right.
Let's just call it that. Let's say, so it gets 40 kilometers to the gallon. Now, wouldn't it be great if you could tweak it and make it get only 20 kilometers to the gallon? Wouldn't that be great?
Wouldn't you want more kilometers per gallon? Like it goes further?
I would think so. But if we want to raise metabolism, what we're talking about is requiring more fuel to do the same amount of work.
Oh, okay.
That's what higher metabolism means.
Right.
It means we need more fuel to do the same amount of work. I mean,
Yeah.
why would anyone want to do that? It doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense.
I see exactly what you're saying.
And if we look at a real life example, okay, hummingbirds are amazing. I live in the land of hummingbirds. We've got 35 species of them here. Okay, I don't know what it's like in BC, but I know where I grew up on the East Coast, there are 2 varieties. Okay,
Yeah, we definitely got them. We definitely got them. I don't know how many though.
Yeah. Okay, so is there something? I mean, I know you're a ball player and you could probably shoot free throws, but how quickly? Like, is there something you can do really quickly? Can you snap your fingers quickly, or?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make a good sound when I do it. I don't know if that's because of my skin, but I can do it fast.
What can you do? What's the fastest thing you can do? Can you blink your eyes really fast, or?
Eyes pretty fast, or maybe a little quick karate chop.
How many karate chops can you do in a second?
Maybe like three or four
Okay, all right, that's
at most.
pretty fast. You can do that, yeah, at the most. A hummingbird can flap its wings up to 70 times in 1 second.
Yeah, it's insane.
This is why they sound like a little motor. It's crazy, right? In order to maintain that level of activity, okay, I'm 6 feet tall, I weigh 150 pounds. If I was a hummingbird, I would have to consume approximately 150 pounds of food per day. They eat their own weight in food every day.
Yeah.
Because their metabolism is so high, because that's what it takes to maintain that level of energy, that level of activity, excuse me, that level of activity. It takes a ton of food, a ton of fuel. Okay, now guess which bird species has the shortest lifespan?
I'll say the hummingbird, the one you just said.
How'd you guess that? Exactly. Yeah. And the ones that have the long lifespans, things like macaws, have much slower metabolism. They eat a tiny amount of food for their size relative to a hummingbird. Okay, they don't come anywhere close to eating their own body weight in food. They don't need to. Okay, so people are afraid that fasting is going to make your metabolism slow way down. Your metabolism does slow down because your body becomes more efficient. And what this looks like, I mean, I have had a guy here from BC, from Vancouver, who began playing competitive football, American style football, when he was like 11 or 12 years old, was a star high school player who went on to become a star college player, like all Canadian sort of thing.
Okay.
And then was injured and couldn't play anymore and got depressed because that was his love. He fasted with me for 23 or 24 days a couple months ago. And about 3-4 weeks after his process was over, including the refeeding part of the process, he was blown away by how strong he felt consuming 1,400 calories a day. When this big strong guy would have before that would have consumed 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day.
And does that have some? Sorry, I was going to say, does that have something to do with how electrical our bodies are?
Well, it very well may. I mean, I won't pretend. I mean, first of all, we run on electricity, right? People think we run on food. In the same way, we run electricity in the same way that your car runs on kinetic energy. It runs on the energy of the pistons going up and down, which turn the crankcase, and the wheels move as a result of that. But gasoline doesn't make your car go anywhere. You can fill up your tank with the highest quality gasoline. Your car is not going anywhere unless you have some electrical energy to start the starter motor, right, which starts moving the pistons up and down, and then it gets firing. So your car is making kinetic energy by using gasoline. In the same way, our bodies use calories. It's a way to measure stored energy to produce electricity, but we actually run on electrical energy, which is why people are shocked. You talked about working out on relatively few calories or on only fruit. I work out every day on 0 calories. And what I mean is, I'm not saying I'm not eating. I'm not pretending that's the case. What I'm telling you is that I said earlier, I had breakfast today of 2 big papayas at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's early for me.
Yeah.
We open next Saturday and we'll be full and I'll be so busy, I won't have a chance to eat until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 10 hours after I wake up, start working and working out throughout the morning.
Yeah, I would think that would definitely show how efficient your body is running, because I mean, I certainly don't feel like I could do that right now, not yet at this point.
Perhaps
Um,
not.
and maybe, you know, maybe a little walk outside or whatever, but if I don't think I could go do a big weightlifting session or play a lot of basketball and not eat anything.
Right. Well, it may be because of inefficiency, but I doubt that's what's going on. I suspect what's really happening is that when you don't eat, you're liberating the energy so your body can begin detoxifying. So unless you've already done enough properly conducted fasts to clean out it, remind me how old you are.
I'm 36.
Okay. I was going to guess you're only 32 or 33, but
Oh, I thought maybe 23 or 22 it would have
looking,
looked like.
looking good. Well, I've known you longer than that. I know a
Yeah,
little
that's
more
right.
about you. But you know, at 36, even if you're making much better choices than average now, chances are good you've been on the planet long enough that there's enough garbage in the body. It usually takes people. I mean, I did a lot of fasting. Of course, I had to figure out how to do it properly. I was on my own because back when I started fasting, we didn't have an internet. I know you've grown up with it, but it wasn't the case for me. Back then, I went to my search engine. It was called the Yellow Pages, and there was nothing under fasting, zero.
Yeah.
So I really worked it out. I mean, I had a book from a guy that'd been dead for years, and I worked it on my own from there. Today no one has to do that. I can, myself and other people who have been through the experience can guide people through it so that they know exactly what they need to do. But most people need to fast 3 or 4 times for 21 to 30 days to get all the garbage out of the body if they've been on the planet for 2-3 decades or more. It's amazing. What we talked earlier about some of the things that we see happening, but it's incredible what happens for people when they do this. And and I want to come back to something. It's just this is so shocking for people. But I had a woman recently fasting with me remotely. So I work with people here at the center. We take about 30 to 32 people at a time, 4 times a year. We run 10-week sessions, but I also work with people remotely all the time. I don't think I've missed a day in 13, 14 years now. So I'm working with groups of people in calls every morning. And I was working with a woman who wound up fasting with me for 72 days, but had a medical appointment on her 21st day, which she decided to keep. And she was in Boston at the time, in December, no sun, no exposure to sunlight. She started out with her vitamin D levels sub-basement, way, way, way low, dangerously low. She also had tumors in her breast, and she was pre-diabetic. On the 21st day of her fast, her vitamin D levels were perfect. Her blood sugar was perfect, and her doctor couldn't find the 3 tumors in the breast. They were gone.
Unreal.
Yeah, and we see this happening all the time. Now, I mean, let me be clear. Fasting won't eliminate all tumors. It depends on what else the body needs to do. It depends on the situation, depends on the condition.
Yep.
And even when it does, because we had a young woman from somewhere in Eastern Europe, maybe 3-4 years ago, came in with a big, like grapefruit-sized tumor in her right breast, and got it down to about the size of a grape in 21 days fasting. And then she went home and back into stressful situations and wound up making poor choices again, and came back 2 years later and it was bigger than it had been before. And she ultimately died as a result of it.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, the tumors do disappear. And again, this sounds crazy to people, but keep in mind, science is clear that there are tumors forming in every human body every day. There are cancer cells forming. what a healthy enough body does is it destroys those cells before the
Hmm.
cancer becomes a problem.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Like you after several years of being on this diet and stuff, you went to a dentist and you found out that you didn't have like 12 or 13 mercury fillings in your teeth anymore. They just disappeared, right?
That's true. Yeah,
Pushed out.
and well, mercury fillings can sometimes over time wear down or fall out. I never noticed it though, but yeah, they were gone, and my teeth had filled back in.
Yeah,
And
see,
I
that's
mean,
amazing. Your teeth fill
dentists,
back in because that's unheard of usually, right?
yeah, it's. I have heard of it before. There's actually a woman, Victoria Butenko, who lives in, I don't know if she's still there. She lived in Oregon with her kids, Russian heritage, but her kids were both raised in the US. And it happened to her son, Sergey, as well.
Hmm.
I haven't seen him in years, but I knew him, when he was a little boy, and saw him again when he was probably closer to 20. And that was probably 15, 20 years ago now. Anyway, it can happen, but most dentists tell me, "Hey, that's nonsense. You're a liar. It's not possible." Well,
Yeah.
it happened. But again, we literally see miracles all the time. I had a woman who was eating a large salad every day for years. She had read a book that told her this is what she should do. She was eating fruit and salads, very much like what I recommend. She was probably overeating, but she had a serious magnesium deficiency. Now, you may be aware of the fact that magnesium is the central atom in the chlorophyll molecule. So green foods contain a lot of magnesium. Every cell contains magnesium. She was eating a big salad every day, and she was magnesium deficient, needing to take a big supplement. So she emailed me one day and said, "Loren," she said, "I was at your full day seminar in Phoenix, Arizona a few weeks ago. And it was amazing. And, everything made sense to me, but I've got this massive magnesium deficiency. I can't fast. I mean, you said you can't take any supplements while fasting. How can I fast?" I said, "Well," and we talked about what she was doing. He said, it's not, you're not lacking for sufficient magnesium coming in. No one should need to eat a large salad every day to get enough magnesium. Okay. There's something else going on. And usually what's happening is the body's simply not working very well. So we can fix that, right, by fasting. Now, you're going to have to go through some discomfort. So it took a while. I finally convinced her to come. She fasted. By the third or fourth day, she began to experience symptoms of magnesium deficiency because she
Yeah.
stopped taking a supplement for the first time.
Hmm.
By the time she was maybe 15 or 16 days, I don't remember what day it was now, although I actually have a video interview with her on my YouTube channel from years. This is 9 years ago, where you can see her telling the story in her own words. But around the 16th, 17th day of her fast, I think 15th day maybe, all the symptoms of deficiency were gone. And I haven't talked to her now for several years, but I saw her twice more after that over the next couple of years when I was back in her part of the country giving lectures and seminars. And she had no more deficiency and was taking no more supplements, eating exactly the same diet she was eating before.
Yeah.
In fact, I started to talk about B12 before. We talked about how B12 is actually produced in the gut. What I didn't tell you is that meat eaters who obviously have more B12 in their bloodstream because they're eating foods that are full of B12, they actually have roughly the same clinical B12 deficiency problems, actual problems, like something not working from lack of B12, as vegans and vegetarians do.
Yeah, I've
Even
heard
though
that
they've got
before.
plenty of, right? So again, it's not about how much one is consuming, it's about
Yeah.
whether the body's working properly or not.
So that actually makes me want to ask you something else I had written down is that how reliable and accurate to you are blood tests? When people get blood tests done, like a vegan, they're like, better get checked out, and then it comes back, and even if it looks all good, or if it doesn't look that good, how accurate do you think those are? How good are they?
Well, not just blood tests, but medical tests in general. I mean, blood tests are probably the most common ones, are suspect. They're often not very accurate. I mean, and it's not that they're not accurately telling you what's happening. It's that it's really about an interpretation. It's, what doctors and medical personnel make of these tests may well be incorrect. How could that be? Well, it reminds me of something. We use a bioimpedance device, a scale by a Japanese company called Tanita. And when we got the device, it was a $500 machine. We wanted to be able to measure. It was actually designed, invented to measure the hydration levels of U.S. servicemen back during the first Gulf War, 30 years ago now, something like that. Here the U.S. had all these personnel in desert conditions. They wanted to make sure people were safe. So the idea was invent a portable technology that could measure people's hydration. Well, at the same time, it turns out it's able to measure muscle mass, body fat. So we've been using this device for quite a long time, and we see, first of all, that the average person is significantly dehydrated. And so, most people have no idea that they're dehydrated because they don't feel it, but it plays an enormous role. The body doesn't function properly if it's not fully hydrated. So, but this technology allows us to see what's happening in the body as someone's going through the process. It allows us to see how the body is using water, whether it's got enough water coming in or not. We'll see most people, for instance, while fasting, most people are going to be losing a little body water every day because as their body tissues go down, the body's using its own tissue for fuel, and the tissue is mostly water. We expect the water to go down. I have a woman actually living in BC. She's over on Victoria Island right now, someone who I've known now for several.
Vancouver Island.
Vancouver Island, I'm sorry. In Victoria.
Yeah.
Actually, not in Victoria. She's on Vancouver Island, but somewhere
Okay.
further north. Yeah,
Okay.
somewhere on the island. Anyway, she is, I went to check, but that's okay. She is somewhere, I think, on day, maybe 12, 13 of her fast now. And most people are going to lose muscle mass, a little bit of muscle mass every day, and their hydration is going down. Her muscle mass has either stayed the same or gone up every day.
Really?
Because she's hydrating her body every day.
Wow.
And we're seeing her hydration levels go up. Now, she started with very low hydration. And, imagine someone who's fully hydrated. It's going to be hard to get them better hydrated if they're already fully hydrated. But, imagine the glass is nearly empty. It's going to be a lot easier to add water to the glass if the glass is full.
Some people are going to say you're BSing about somebody's muscle mass going up during a water fast.
Yeah. Well, but remember, muscle mass, they say babies are born 80% water. Most adults are 70% or less. And they, again, what they say is, well, that's normal, right? Normal. Yeah. That's true. It is normal because normal means average, typical. That's what a norm is. It's an average. It doesn't mean it's healthy. So, when we got this device, I looked at some of the graphs. There are these bar graphs. This thing talks via Bluetooth to a computer, and we weigh someone, and all this information shows up, and it creates these bar graphs. And it says that, if you're a 36-year-old man, it might say that it's perfectly okay to be 30% body fat. Like, in what world is 30% body fat considered healthy? That's high, right? And then it says, it's the same thing like your hydration level. It's perfectly okay if your body's only 50% water. I'm like, hang on, no, there's no way. Now, that's different than hydration level because it depends on how much body fat you have. We don't need to get into all that, but it creates these graphs. And at the time we got it, I wanted to make sure I really understood. And I spent hours. They were very generous. The technicians who had programmed the versions for North America, it was a North American subsidiary, and they had done all the programming for these devices. The head of the programming department probably spent 20 hours talking to me over the course of the first 2 or 3 weeks we had this thing, because I wanted to be sure I really understood how it worked and what it meant. And one day I'm talking to him and I said, by the way, I don't think your graphs here are valid. And he said, how can that be? We got all the information. The information came from the American Medical Association. I said, well, I think you just answered your own question. They're invalid because it's data given from the American Medical Association. It's data based on how the average person is. That's not how the average person should be. That's just how the average person is today, right? So, for instance, one of the things we see all the time, white blood cells. I'll talk to people and they'll say, they say my white blood cells are too low. Okay, that's okay. It's probably not a problem. Now, I mean, it is possible to have too few of them, but that's not usually what's going on, especially with a raw vegan. Why not? Well, when you injure yourself, now you're an athlete, I'm guessing you've suffered some injuries over the years, right?
Yep.
It happens, right? I mean, you probably, if nothing else, you've probably fallen off your bike and skinned your knee when you were a kid. You know, we all suffer injuries from time to time. When we injure ourselves in any way, there's a process that occurs that's called leukocytosis. Leukocytes are one of the white blood cells. We have a variety of different types of white blood cells, but the body manufactures white blood cells, mostly in the bone marrow, sends them to the site of injury to help the body heal. Okay, that's leukocytosis. When we eat cooked food, the body creates white blood cells and sends them to the digestive tract.
Yeah, that's a very fascinating thing I've heard before.
It interacts with cooked food as if we've been poisoned, but only because we have. Okay, so the average person eating cooked food is going to have a high white blood cell count relative to a truly clean body eating optimally, because the average person eats something 5 times a day, roughly, and 5 times a day the body says, I got to make more white blood cells.
And
Because
does it not do that with fruit or raw foods at all?
no, it doesn't do that. It only does that in response to cooked food, and that's because cooking food, if you look at a culinary academy, I'm not sure what's available in Canada, but in New York, there's a school called the Culinary Institute of America, CIA. And it's a big, well-known, well-respected school. And if you look at their online course catalog, you'll see a series of courses called things like Food Chemistry 101, Food Chemistry 102. Food chemistry. Yeah, when you heat foods to 300, 400, 500 degrees Fahrenheit, you are creating chemical reactions between them,
Mm-hmm.
right? The browning of barbecued food, right? When I was single and still eating everything, I kept a big barbecue grill right outside my back door, and I barbecued chicken all the time, right? Didn't know at the time that eating barbecued chicken with the surface gets browned and blackened sometimes. Those are carcinogenic compounds. It's called Maillard reactions that are caused by cooking the food. It's a chemical reaction, okay? Yeah. So every time we eat cooked food, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about proteins, fats, or carbohydrates. There's only 3 macronutrients: proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. We cook anything at high enough temperature, we are creating toxic and carcinogenic compounds. And your body's smart enough to recognize them. So when you eat cooked food, there's an immune response. Your body creates leukocytosis and sends white blood cells. Your temperature goes up on purpose, right? I mean, so the average body temperature in a clean body is going to be lower than normal. Doctors might say, well, that's too low. No, it's perfectly fine. White blood cell count is going to be lower than normal. There's going to be less urea. Urea is a byproduct of protein metabolism, right? Uric acid from urine, right? Urine, these are all related products. There's going to be less of this stuff if you're not eating a lot of protein. So there's a lot of places where they're off and they're wrong. In fact, look at the way most people eat. In 2019, in the beginning of 2020, there was a survey published of all of the nutrition studies globally from 2019, defining the #1 nutrition-related cause of death globally. You want to take a guess what that might be? #1 nutrition-related cause of death globally. And I'll give you a hint. It's not starvation.
Oh, okay. So from eating food, you're saying
exactly
like something. Death globally. I mean, at first I would have thought something to do with saturated fat, atherosclerosis, something along those lines. But
it's a good guess.
Are you talking about something poisonous, like people getting food poisoning? Or
I'm talking about people dying because of what they ate. What's the #1 cause of people dying because of what they ate globally?
I don't know. What type of food you're saying specifically?
No, I'm talking about what the condition would be. Okay. What's going on? The #1 nutrition-related cause of death globally in 2019 was the excess consumption of salt.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now, most people think salt, it's something that's on your kitchen table. How bad can it be? In fact, most people think we need to have salt. We don't actually need any salt. Salt's actually toxic to the body. What our
Mhm.
bodies need in every single cell is organic sodium. And sodium is actually one of the most important electrolytes. As an athlete, this is something you're probably quite aware of,
Yes. Oh
right?
yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't know if how often this happens playing basketball. I guess if you're playing like a pickup game outside on a hot day, it could be an issue. When
Hmm.
you're playing a game, it's probably inside, a
Yeah.
space that might be air conditioned, and you're less likely to become overheated.
Usually,
Um,
yeah. But I know what you're saying. Yeah. I play at Kitsilano Beach in Vancouver in the summers, and before I changed my diet, people were playing in the peak hours of the sunlight for whatever God-given reason.
right.
And I would feel like very bagged after, almost like slightly sunstroke effects at times. But since I
Yeah.
changed my diet and I started going to the beach with a bunch of watermelon and some
Mhm.
water and maybe like
Exactly.
a banana or two, but
Doesn't happen.
drinking mostly water and eating watermelon, I
Yeah.
swear I could all of a sudden play 3 or 4 hours in the peak hours of the day. I wouldn't get any burn, and I wouldn't have any of these ill effects afterwards. It's all about hydration of the cells and stuff.
Well, I mean, hydration is a huge piece of it. And, again, I mean, I'm the hydration guy, right? I mean, I believe that hydration is the most important factor. As I said earlier, we've seen, I mean, I didn't say this, but we've now measured more than 5,000 people's level of hydration, cellular hydration. And we've seen 2 or 3 people who weren't extremely dehydrated. Most people are very dehydrated, way more than they would think. But um, yeah, I mean, this is actually about the fact that we need to maintain sodium and potassium and chloride in particular balance with each other. And when they become out of balance, we create problems. Now, so I said sodium and chloride. Sodium chloride is also called salt. We can get sodium and chloride from eating salt, but salt is toxic to the body. So if I take someone who's got low sodium and we start putting a little tiny bit of salt in their food, if we're not careful, they'll start swelling up like a balloon
Hmm.
because the body's trying to protect itself from the salt. Okay, that's not the way to get it. We're intended to get our sodium from eating foods, real foods that contain small amounts of sodium. The problem is that we create imbalances in the body.
And why is salt itself like an excitotoxin if the separate compounds of salt, like you said, sodium and chloride, we both need, but together it's like toxic?
This is chemistry.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true. You can take the exact same compounds and have them here, and it's not a problem. But put them together, and now we've created something that's harmful to us. So sodium chloride will dehydrate you, and your body will actually draw water out of your cells. Have you ever been to Israel by any chance?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so obviously you've heard of the Dead Sea.
Yes.
You know why it's called the Dead Sea?
Um, I did know. I kind of forget. I'm assuming bodies will float on, or I mean, something to do with the salt content in the water is what I heard before.
That's right, exactly. The Dead Sea has such a high salt content in the water
Hmm.
that nothing can live in it. And nothing can live in it because of a very simple process that you've heard of and may not remember from 8th grade science class, osmosis.
Okay.
Osmosis is when water moves, the solvent, the solute doesn't move, but water moves from a high to a low concentration. So what this means is if you go into the Dead Sea, if you go into the Pacific Ocean where you live, or the Pacific Ocean where I live, um, I was just in the Pacific Ocean not that a few days ago. I'm guessing you're probably not doing that much swimming in March in BC.
No, it's still a little chilly. Some people
Just a
might take
tiny
a
bit.
dip in there, but I get a little colder than a lot of
Yeah,
people. So,
yeah. So if you go into the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, most of the year, it's going to have very little impact on your level of hydration. Why? Because the level of salt in the salt water is roughly equivalent, very close to the quantity of sodium in your bloodstream, in your body. And so that means there's no movement of water because the two levels are roughly the same. But if you go into the Dead Sea where there's a lot of salt in the water, it's much higher sodium concentration. It's so high. I've been in the Dead Sea a couple of times. If you go into the Dead Sea, you can't sink. You
wow.
float because the water is, you're much more buoyant because of the density of the water, because of the salt in it.
Hmm.
And so there's so much salt in the water that what happens is the water in your body begins to migrate into the sea.
Oh, wow.
And so it's called the Dead Sea because anything that goes in there for too long becomes dehydrated and dies.
Oh, okay.
Plants won't live in it. Animals can't live in it. Nothing can live in it. Yeah.
I was gonna say, so you're very generous with your time today, and I can stay here as long as you like. I do have a bunch of questions that we haven't
Sure.
touched
Go
on.
ahead and ask your questions. That's fine.
Yeah, okay. So I got a bunch here. I mean, if you want to make it brief, you're more than welcome to. If you feel like you want to elaborate, go ahead. One thing
Okay.
I really wanted to touch on that I've had a lot of people bring up to me over the years and recently, is the whole. I've known some vegans even where, they got worried about this, or one of them got pregnant and then they're worried about the kid. Oh, I don't know if I should stick with veganism, and it's about
Right.
fish. It's about DHA and EPA. And some
Yeah.
people say the plant food ALA, which is what I guess we convert into DHA, is too difficult to convert and you can't get enough of it. And they say like our plant foods that have it just don't have enough of it, even if it's hemp hearts or pumpkin seeds or fruit or whatever.
Yeah.
What do you think
Yeah.
about that one?
No, it's complete nonsense. I mean, but again, I mean, understand that the average person's body doesn't work very well, right? So you take the average body, who, let's say we're talking about someone who is they're having children. So let's say they're between 30 and 40 on average, right? I mean, between 25 and 35 maybe. They've been let's just say 3 decades on the planet on average, and breathing polluted air and being affected these days by microwave signal from cell phone towers and Wi-Fi and electromagnetic radiation from everything around them. Smart meters, I know, are a big issue in Canada. I'm not sure what it's like where you are, but I know in Toronto, in Ontario, it was a big deal some years back. People objected to them because the radiation is very harmful to the body. And we've all grown up eating garbage that doesn't belong in the body. Even the things that most people think are healthy. Again, all cooked foods, your body reacts to as if you've been poisoned because cooking creates toxic compounds and destroys nutrients. So all this is going on. So you're taking food where much of the nutritional value has been destroyed and putting it into a body that doesn't work very well. Yeah, it's not gonna work out that well. Get the body clean, eat optimally, and it's relatively easy to get your body's needs met. There's no evidence that we can't get our needs met. I mean, many people thrive without needing to supplement or eat fish.
So you think, like, when people say, well, there's not enough DHA or EPA in fruit, that is it again the thing where the paradigm we're in is just incorrect, where they say the amount that you need is just simply not true?
Absolutely, yeah. And in fact, I started talking about this with sodium. It's again, it's very similar. It's because of how the average body works. So, the average person is consuming a ton of sodium. The average North American now gets 61%, I think was the most recent number, of their calories from ultra processed foods. I mean, it's crazy, right? And these substances are filled with salt, right? There's tons of sodium chloride in these foods. And so what happens is the average person's walking around with relatively high levels of sodium in their bloodstream because they're eating so much salt. And medicine now says that the range for how much sodium should be in your body is between X and Y. It's 135 to 145, something like that. But that's based on the fact that the average person is consuming salt by the tablespoonfuls every day.
Yeah.
When your body's clean, it's the average person with a truly clean body is going to have lower sodium levels and be perfectly fine there. Nothing to worry about.
Yeah. One statement I've heard, I want to get your take on this. What do you think about this statement? Every cell in the body needs cholesterol to function. And subsequently, how people say we need cholesterol, we have to consume it, or else we won't have any. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, these are people who don't have the slightest idea what they're talking about, because the simple fact, I mean, they're right and they're wrong. And what I mean is, yes, they're right. The body needs cholesterol, but we don't have to consume it. The body produces cholesterol. Again, it's like the B12. The animals have cholesterol in their bodies because they produce it.
Yeah.
Our bodies produce it too. We don't need to consume it ever. Consuming it's not a good thing for us.
That's what I thought as well.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these things like B12 or other things, we get told, our bodies don't produce it or don't produce enough of it. But I think from what I've seen and read and everything and experienced, that doesn't seem to be the case quite often.
Yeah. I mean, it's again, it's not a question of can the body produce it or not, or even really can it produce enough of it. It's relative to what? I mean, the average person's body is constantly out of balance. If the body's out of balance, it's going to need far more. When the body's out of balance, it's usually minerals that are imbalanced, right? So it's going to need more minerals. B12 issues happen because of dehydration.
Yeah. What do you think about the idea of biophotons? Is it true that fruit contains more biophotons than all other foods? And what do you think the relationship is between biophotons and the human physiology? Does it tie in at all into, I don't want to say necessarily spirituality, but like energetics and stuff like that, and compared to other foods that don't have as many biophotons?
Yeah. So let me say first of all that biophotons are an area that I'm not that familiar with, haven't done so much research into. Everything else we've talked about tonight are things that I'm well acquainted with. And you said a couple times that's what I thought. I'm not telling you what I think. I'm telling you what I know to be factual. And here I am telling you now. I don't really know so much about this now, but there's no question. I mean, there's energy from the sun in our food, and there's going to be. I mean, fruit requires sunlight to be produced. Most fruits. There are a few that will grow in the jungle in shadier places, but most grow on the edge where you're getting ample sunlight. And so I think there's no question that we're getting some benefit from consuming that, but I can't really speak much about that intelligently because I don't know so much about it.
Okay, fair enough. The word starchivores gets passed around in the vegan community a lot.
Right.
I personally think it's a little absurd. They either say we're starchivores or we're herbivores, and I think both of them, in my humble opinion, are ridiculous. And
Agreed.
I was, because starchy stuff like potatoes and stuff, we make it so that it's closer to fruit. That's why we cook it like we do and stuff. Am I right?
Exactly. You're absolutely right. Yeah. When you take a potato, which is so high in starch that it would be almost unpalatable to most people, like there'd be no desire to eat that in a natural, normal situation.
Mm-hmm.
We make it palatable by cooking it, because when we cook starch, right, many people may not realize this, but all starches, complex carbohydrates, are made up of sugars. So when we cook the starch, we're breaking it down into the component sugars that make it up. Those we can easily absorb and the body can use. We actually can't use starch at all. We actually need the sugars that starches are made of. Now, we could take potatoes, which we're not at all, I mean, not the least bit attracted to, like, it's a potato sitting on a shelf. Does that look appealing to you? Maybe it's appealing to someone who's been grown up eating potatoes if it's been cooked and it's got a bunch of butter on it, or, whatever they use. Now, okay, that looks tasty because I have memories of eating that. But when I look at the potato, I don't know about you, my mouth doesn't water. It looks like something, why would I want to eat that?
Yeah.
If I bite into it, my body's going to say, that's nasty. Don't eat that. That tastes disgusting. When we cook it, we're actually converting starch into sugar, and so it gets sweet when we cook it. A lot of things that we get sweet because we cook them, because we're breaking starch down to sugar. But we have no natural desire to eat starch and no ability to digest it in its natural form. Again, we have to cook it in order to be able to eat it.
Yeah.
Every other species on the planet can walk out into its environment and find what it needs without needing stoves or ovens or microwaves or or grills or juicers or blenders or anything else.
Yeah. And some people, they'll say we got smarter once we migrated and we started cooking food, and they'll say it was either cooked food in general or it was the meat that made us smarter. I think it's actually possibly the opposite. I kind of agree with a gentleman named Tony Wright on this, who's done some interesting research on us as humans, and he thinks that we may have actually been devolving for quite a while now.
Oh, I agree completely. Yeah, I agree completely with Tony Wright. on this. I've been saying exactly the same thing. First of all, if eating meat made us smarter, then shouldn't dogs and cats be like at all the Ivy League schools? Because they've been eating meat much longer than people have. They've always eaten meat.
Yeah.
As like the entire part, that's all they eat, right? Eating meat doesn't make anyone smarter. And there's no science, by the way. This is a theory that people say this is what happened. Really, where's the evidence for that? It's just a theory. It's completely unsupportable by scientific fact or logic.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an idea. The idea that we ate, cooking food made us smarter. Well, if cooking food made us smarter, then how did we get smart enough to cook food?
Yeah, a good question there.
We're living in these, let's not talk about BC. Let's talk about the Yukon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You wind up in the Yukon. Good luck, right?
Yeah.
Living without artificial clothing and et cetera.
Yeah.
But you're in the Yukon. You're going to have to cook food because there's nothing that grows there most of the year.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can eat. You can't pick fruit. You're going to have to cook something in order to be able to eat anything. I think what's true, and it's oftentimes there's some truth in what's being said. Was it that we got more intelligent when we started cooking food? Perhaps. But was it because of eating cooked food? I don't think so. Mm-hmm. My guess, what happened is that we wound up in climates that weren't hospitable to us. And whether that was because of climatic change on the planet or because, I think it's clear, science says we started out in equatorial Africa, where we probably all would have been black-skinned at some point, dark-skinned, living in a tropical location. And then the path of migration is is believed to be well understood, how we wound up where we wound up many, many, many years ago. But what if curious people said, well, let's go see what's up here. And they just started walking, and maybe they started walking in the winter time. And by the time they got to a place that was, let's say by the time they started in Central America, and they walked up through Central America, and by the time they get up into the northern US, it's now June and July.
Yeah.
And so it's getting warmer as they go, and it's like, they feel like the climate's the same everywhere they go. Mm-hmm. And then they make it up into BC or the Yukon in the summertime, and it's pretty nice there. And they think, oh, look, this is beautiful. There's no one around. There's all these big animals. There's things growing here. There's fruit. There's cherries and peaches and apples and plums and pears, etc. I think they have a 2-week growing season in the Yukon, but whatever it is. And they decide to settle down. Mm-hmm. And then before long, it starts to get cold. And it might well have been they didn't think to themselves, well, it's probably because we came far north. Like they didn't know about the North Pole. They didn't understand there's the equator where it's warmest. And all they knew was that, well, it was always warm until now. Everywhere they'd ever been, it was warm until now. The world must be getting colder.
Yeah.
Now, what happened was a lot of people probably died because they didn't figure out how to survive in inhospitable conditions. They would have needed to fight to make shelter for the first time. They would have needed to have fire for the first time. They might have needed to kill animals to use their skins to keep warm, as well as being the only source of food in the wintertime. The Inuit in northern Canada and Alaska in the US, they lived on animals because that's all there was most of the year. They lived on blubber.
I've heard many people romanticize those regions and those diets they had and said, they're living off the land, they're healthy, blah, blah. From what I've seen, their lifespans weren't very good.
No, they lived to about 45 and they were completely bent over with osteoporosis. The same thing, people point to these folks who are completely misguided, who are promoting something that they call the Carnivore Diet. Mm-hmm. They point to the Maasai in Africa. There's a tribe who lives on nothing but meat, blood, and milk of animals.
Yeah.
That's all they consume. And they say, look, these are warriors. Look how strong they are. studies have shown that the average 40-year-old male's arteries are roughly in the same condition as the average 75-year-old Westerner. And
Yeah.
that's not good condition. This is atherosclerotic plaque. They're about to die of a heart attack. They don't have a long lifespan. They don't make it to 50. And, by the time they're 40, they're pretty bad. They're not in very good shape. I mean, there's no evidence that this diet's a good idea for anyone. It's not.
I wanted to ask you, excuse me, about the idea of hybridized fruits and so-called hybrid fruits being bad for you. I personally feel that if it has a seed, I don't really see a problem with it. Now, Dr. Sebi, the man who died there, some think was killed or whatever, that was famous for supposedly treating and curing AIDS and whatnot, he advocated for only eating foods that grew naturally and were not hybrid foods. What do you think about that?
Well, so I've never studied Sebi's work. I obviously know who he is, who he was. And I'm sure he meant well, and I'm sure he helped a lot of people. But he's wrong about hybrids. Let's be clear. Let me ask you a question, Chad. Do you like grapefruits?
Yep.
I don't know. When I grew up, we only had white grapefruits back then when I was a kid. And it was the only time we were allowed to touch the sugar. My mother had a sugar bowl because she drank coffee and she put sugar in her coffee. We weren't allowed to use sugar except Sunday mornings when we would each get a half a grapefruit. And we would put a little sugar on top because you couldn't eat it otherwise. It tasted like battery acid. They were so acidic.
Yeah, I prefer the red ones.
Now you've got red ones and pink ones that are pretty sweet and pretty tasty. But the grapefruit was discovered one day when an Israeli walked out to his orchard where he had oranges and pomelos and said, "What's this? This looks different. What is this?" And it turned out that it was a hybrid. Okay. The orange and the pomelo, same family, bred together, right? The pollen from one pollinated the flower of the other. And what happened was they got something new, the grapefruit. Okay. Hybrids are nothing more than the offspring of two different parents. Now, you can't breed an orange and an apple. It's not going to work. Okay. Apples and pears, yes. And there are hybrids that are combinations of apples and pears. In fact, do you like apples?
I don't mind them. Yeah.
Yeah, you're a Canadian. I think you have to like apples.
Well,
right?
to be honest, I don't eat much of them because I probably got sick of them from so many years of apples. But
Right. Have you been to an apple orchard?
Yeah.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but do you remember what kind of apples they were?
Not particularly, but I would imagine probably Granny Smith, and
Okay.
I don't really remember much else. I remember some yellow ones.
Yeah, it's yellow delicious, golden delicious. So if you go to a Granny Smith apple orchard, every single tree in that orchard was a grafted tree. And for people who don't know what that means, what they do is they take a root. It could be of an apple or a pear. Usually you want something that's a strong tree that produces very strong rootstock, that's hardy and does well and maybe grows quickly. And then you take a branch from an existing Granny Smith tree and you look to get the rootstock, the trunk from that tree that you were growing. You cut the tree off. So you just have a piece of the trunk at the bottom and you cut the branch when they're about the same thickness, like these two fingers. And you put one on top of the other, you wrap it with saran wrap, literally, and the two living pieces of wood grow together. You can usually see a knob where that occurred.
Yeah. I've seen that on the internet. It's fascinating.
The reason that I know, we actually have done some grafting here. We have lots of grafted trees. As you may be aware, we have 150 plus varieties of fruit growing on site. But the reason I know that every Granny Smith tree is a grafted tree is because when you take the seeds from a Granny Smith apple and plant them, you'll get an apple tree. You won't get anything but an apple tree, but it'll be a new variety, every single one.
Yeah.
You don't get the same thing. If you want the same thing, you have to graft the tree. And that's because you've got the pollen from two different trees coming together and they're forming something new. And do you have siblings?
No.
Okay. So I mentioned earlier I had 6 siblings. 4 of us were from the same 2 parents, and then there are 3 more from a different mother, right? But the 4 of us, same mother and father, we're all exactly the same, right? My sisters all have beards and they're incredibly handsome like me. No, we're all different. We're all different. I'm 6 feet tall. My younger sister is 5'8". The oldest sister is 5'2", and the one just above me, between this number 2, is 4'10" and a half. We're like a stare. Okay. We're, I mean, we have some facial features that are similar. You can look at us and see that we're related, but there's a very short one, a relatively tall one, and 2 in the middle, like stair steps. We all came from the same 2 parents, but we all have different DNA. So a hybrid is nothing more than the offspring of 2 different parents. What are they most recently normally called? A jackass is one term for them.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean the guy upstairs who plays his stereo too loud. I mean the animal which is the offspring of a female horse and a male donkey.
Right.
And these have been bred for years. Okay, why do people want these things? Why don't they use a horse or a donkey? Well, horses they require a lot of food and water. They require a lot of rest. They're strong, but donkeys are actually much stronger pound for pound. But donkeys are incredibly stubborn. Donkeys don't want to do, horses, you train a horse, you can pretty much lead it anywhere you want to. It'll do what you want it to do.
Yep.
Donkeys are like, the animal going, screw you, I'm going to do whatever I want. They don't care what you want. So when you get the offspring, you get the best of both. You get an animal that requires less food and less water and less rest. It'll work far more hours than a horse will. And it's much stronger than a horse pound per pound.
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up on a farm for a while, actually. We actually had a couple mules and a donkey. And I definitely know exactly what you're saying, judging by their character.
Right. So the mule is a hybrid. That's the other word. The mule is a hybrid of the horse, and it has to be a female horse and a male donkey. If you use a male horse and a female donkey, you get a different offspring, which isn't so desirable. People don't want those because you wind up not getting the qualities you want, right? But the mules are the best of both worlds. That's what people want. So just like the grapefruit showed up all by itself, it's a hybrid. It was offspring of 2 different, showed up by itself. The mule, chances are good. Horse and a donkey showed up at the same party one night. They got talking. They danced a little bit. They went back to his place. Next thing you knew, there was a mule. Okay. No one had to make them. They just happened by itself. Hybrids are all things that could happen in nature.
Yeah.
We can't make hybrids that couldn't happen by themselves.
Exactly. Another thing I was going to mention, going back to some of the questions some people have mentioned to me about what they think about certain deficiencies. Vitamin D3, I have it written down here in a note, supposedly non-existent in plant foods, which contain only D2. Body has trouble converting it. Does the body really have trouble converting it?
Well, I don't know how much trouble the body has, because I don't care, because I'm not interested, because there's no need for us to worry about it, because we're intended to get vitamin D from
the sun.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
We are tropical animals. Okay, you can live in Vancouver or wherever in BC you live. You live in Vancouver?
Not in. I've been close to it for a while, but not directly.
Okay. But you can live in BC.
Yeah.
But I don't think you want to be walking around in your birthday suit 10, 11 months of the year. Maybe 1 or 2 months. Yeah. You might be able to live naked there for 1 or 2 months a year, but the rest of you can't do it. You can do it in the tropics. We're tropical animals. We create tropical climate, microclimate inside of our clothing, inside of our buildings with our heating systems and fires, etc. Because we're still tropical. That's so, right. Yeah. We should be living in places where we can get ample sunlight all year long. We don't need to consume vitamin D. Because vitamin D, in fact, is a hormone. It's not a vitamin. It's a hormone that your body produces on the skin when exposed to sunlight, it takes the cholesterol your body makes
Yeah.
itself and creates vitamin D. And by
And
the way, when you do get sun, don't shower for a couple hours with soap after getting some sun,
yeah, I've
because
heard
if
that
you
one.
wash the oil off your skin, you're not going to absorb it. It's
I
absolutely
was
true.
I was researching that one for a while. I kept coming across different arguing opinions on that, and how some was
Yeah,
saying it was not true, some saying it was. And I thought, well, I don't have to shower right away, so I'll just leave it on for a while.
exactly.
What about, so I feel like tropical fruits. Now these are always the ones that I'm generally seeking out at like the Asian markets and stuff like that in Vancouver,
Sure,
because they're better
sure,
places for them.
sure.
Tropical fruits to me seem no doubt to be much more appealing, and much, on average, let's say, much
Yeah.
more appealing and fulfilling after eating them. Whereas, if I just have the apples and the pears and the plums and the nectarines, I don't feel like it's quite enough for, I don't know what category, what vitamin, mineral, but is it true that the tropical fruits, they must be, on average, they must have more of the stuff we need in them, or something more fulfilling, like a durian, for
Well,
example, to me, or a Ecuadorian papaya? They're just so amazing, and same with certain types of mangoes.
yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, remember that um, trees make sugar, right, through photosynthesis. And photosynthesis requires sunlight. And so in northern BC, where in BC, let's just say, where you can get cherries and apples and pears and peaches and plums and nectarines, um, you're not going to get a lot of fruit that's going to be super sweet, because there isn't enough sunlight. There isn't enough hours of sunlight.
Hmm.
Okay, here in Costa Rica, where I live, I've been in the tropics now for nearly 16 years, and we probably don't have 10 days a year where there's no sunlight. I mean, you could go outside and get
Yeah.
sunlight almost every single day of the year. Maybe 10 days, maybe 15 days, where it's going to be cloudy and raining all day. That's pretty unusual for that to happen. So
Yeah.
um, the growing season is 365 days. There's plenty of water. There's plenty of sunlight. The trees here have the opportunity to make much more sugar. And so tropical fruits tend to be more appealing to us because they're going to be sweeter. And we've evolved to seek out sugar. Why? Because sugar is calories. Calories are energy. The body uses energy to make fuel, to make electricity.
Hmm.
So we're going to be, if we're living in a place where food is at all scarce, or there's any scarcity in that time of year, things that are higher in sugar or fat are going to be more appealing to us. And so tropical fruits tend to be sweeter. And they're also, you're probably going to find far fattier fruits in sunnier places as well. I mean,
Yeah.
olives are Mediterranean fruits, but durians and avocados, you're only going to find in the tropics. Um,
Yeah. And far less acidic too, obviously, compared to the stuff we get imported. Like when I was in Ecuador, I had a white pineapple that they're famous for the first time,
yeah,
and I couldn't believe there was literally no symptoms on my tongue or throat of any sort of acidic nature. And
right.
it tasted so incredible and sweet. And, I realized, well, this is how they're supposed to taste.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
Now, I mean, by the way, I
yeah.
mean, I spent, as you may be aware, I spent my first 14 years raw living outside of Washington, D.C.
Mm,
And when I started coming to the tropics, I realized, oh, you know what? I don't know if I really want to eat a lot of tropical fruit back in DC,
yeah,
because it wasn't that good relative to what I was getting when I came to visit Costa Rica or Panama or the Caribbean islands.
for sure.
There's just no comparison. But I lived for all those years primarily. I mean, in the wintertime, it was apples and pears and bananas and kiwis. Kiwis are not tropical. Bananas are, of course. Um, what else we would have? We would have a lot of salads. We had citrus in the wintertime, is when oranges and grapefruits and tangerines are really at their peak in North America. That's when we would get them.
Yeah.
In the summertime, of course, there's an abundance of things. And I was living primarily on peaches and plums and nectarines and melons of all types, cherries when I could get cherries during the season. you really learn to celebrate the seasons living in places where stuff is seasonal. Even here, I mean, we have papayas and watermelons and bananas and pineapples and mangoes, which are seasonal, but someplace in Costa Rica we can get them all the time, pretty much throughout the year. We'll have one or two varieties. So these are things we have all the time, and then everything else is more seasonal. We'll have some times the year that we can have rambutans. We'll have some. I mean, you really appreciate them when they're here, right? We've got water apples. We have probably 7 or 8 water apple trees that are bearing fruit. They're not the most exciting fruit. They're like very subtle pears. It's a very subtle, delicate flavor, high in water. They're now forming on the trees, and I guess it's going to be another couple months before we see them. But when they're here, it's a very short season. Like we have tons of water apples over the course of 1 month, and then they're gone.
Yeah.
We have tons of mandarins over the course of 2 months, and then they're gone. So you enjoy them while you can.
I ideally, like I need to figure out a way to live at least half the year in the tropics, and then because it'll be tough for me to totally give up the mountains like you see behind me here, because I love hiking and all that stuff so much, and I know we got a little bit more of that, a little bit bigger mountains, but it's just so nice in the tropics.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no, go ahead. No, I'm sure you do.
I was just going to say, I mean, I live in the mountains. We're up here at about 650 meters. It's not as high as the Rocky Mountains for sure.
Yeah.
But we have some pretty impressive mountains here, and hiking. I mean, personally, if it were me, I would be really simple. I would probably go home to BC to visit every year.
Yeah.
But I would definitely live in the tropics where you can get sunlight and high quality food every single day of the year. You can pick fruit off the tree.
Yeah, when I was in Vietnam a year ago, I loved it. Like I love the heat. I don't care if I'm white or anything, but I could get the tan reasonably well too. I didn't get burnt much, and I do think, I don't know if I asked you that yet, but I feel like fruit, especially when you're eating a lot of it and your body's really well hydrated, that you're a lot less likely to get burnt by the sun.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Exactly why that is. I mean, I can explain it in the layman's terms. But the tree, the fruit itself is sitting in, especially tropical fruit, is sitting in the tropical sun, and it has chemicals to protect itself from burning, from drying out and being burned by the sun. When we eat the fruit, we seem to get the benefit of those chemicals.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple things I was going to touch on also. Okay, so in your opinion, do you think a fruitarian diet, let's say, can change someone's eye color? Because I've seen many examples of that where people say their eye color changed over time, which is pretty interesting.
Right. And this was actually promoted by a doctor who used to tell people this was the case. Not exactly. I mean, there are people who would argue with this, but what I can tell you, what's happening, again, I think science is clear. There are blue eyes and brown eyes, and some variations like green eyes, and some who look a little bit more gray. But what happens is, let's say you've got blue eyes, and your body is quite toxic. Though your eyes may look brown, they're not brown. They're not changing from brown to blue. That can't happen any more than I'm going to change from having. Well, from being Caucasian to being African descent. That's not going to change. This is determined by your DNA. It's not changing as a result of cleaning up your diet or cleansing your body. But what's happening is the garbage that shows up in the eyes is going away, and so your eye gets lighter. There's no question that the eye. I mean, we take thousands of people, we take many hundreds of people through fasts every year, and we see significant shifts in the color, the apparent color of the eye, and how bright the eye is, and how clear the sclera, the white part of the eye is. It becomes much whiter, and the colors become much more intense. But we're not seeing a real change from brown to blue. We're just seeing a dirty blue eye, which might have looked like it wasn't blue, actually become true to its real color.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Juice fasting, I'm assuming that anytime if someone's juicing, that the recommendation would be not to constantly drink juice all the time, for reasons you may have mentioned earlier. Now, juicing's become pretty popular and stuff. Would you say it's more suitable for, you just have a little glass once in a while kind of thing, as opposed to, like, what about a so-called juice fast, which obviously isn't real fasting, but it's kind of like giving the body a break nonetheless, energy-wise?
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear, first of all, that people can call anything they want to, but fasting means the complete absence from calories and nutrients. When we are consuming juices, which contain both calories and nutrients, we are consuming an unnatural liquid food. It's unnatural. It's made from something natural, but it doesn't exist in nature. We have to put it through a machine. It's I don't know that I'll ever get over the astonishment that I find that people imagine. I mean, I was this person myself 35 years ago. I bought my first Champion juicer 35 years ago, and I used to travel with it. I would travel with 2 suitcases, a big one and a carry-on. In the carry-on, I had my clothes. In the big one, I had my Champion juicer, a giant bag of apples, or many bags of apples, and a giant bag of carrots, like a 25-pound bag of carrots. If I was going somewhere for 4 or 5 days, I travel with this. If I was going to be somewhere for longer than that, I knew I could find the stuff wherever I was going to be, but I'd always had enough to get me through at least several days, because I would drink juices throughout the day, all day. Now, today, I would say, yeah, I don't actually believe this is such a good idea. Because again, foods are perfect. If we take nature's perfect foods, a fruit, whatever, and we run it through a machine, what we're doing is we are eliminating, first of all, the fiber. Well, so what? What do we need fiber for? Well, I postulated many years ago, 20 years ago, yeah, but what if the fiber contains things we need? 10 years ago or so, maybe less, 7 years ago, research proved there are essential nutrients bound up in the fiber.
And you talk about, sorry, soluble fiber in the fruit, or the insoluble?
Soluble fiber.
Yeah. There's a lot of people say, oh, you shouldn't eat so much fruit. It's got too much fiber. We can't digest fiber. And I generally will say, well, most of it's soluble fiber.
Yeah. It doesn't even, it's absolutely true that if we're consuming things that are very high in insoluble fiber, things like cellulose, like kale, for instance. And again, this is where people go, this guy's crazy. What are you talking about? Kale's a superfood. It's the best thing on the planet. And yet, it's interesting. I've been telling people for 25, 30 years, don't eat kale. Kale's impossible to digest. It's too hard for the body to digest. We don't need to eat it. And now there's multiple studies that show exactly what I've been saying. You take a group of people and feed them a serving of kale with a predetermined amount of vitamin A equivalency units. The body converts carotenes into vitamin A. Vitamin A only comes from animals. The carnivore people say, well, you have to eat animals to get vitamin A. Mm-hmm. No, we don't. The animals on the planet that don't eat animals make it in their bodies. Yeah, but it's much less efficient. It's efficient enough. It's what we're supposed to do. We don't need any more than that. So they feed people a specific portion size of kale. They know how much vitamin A equivalency units or how much vitamin A the body could get, and then they measure how much the body actually gets. And what they find is that people it's 4 times easier to get vitamin A from eating fruit, papayas or mangoes, than it is from eating kale.
Yeah, that's funny, because a lot of people will say, oh, you gotta convert the carotenoids into vitamin A, and your body's not good at doing that with plant food and stuff.
No, it's 4 times more efficient. And what they literally found was that when there was twice as much vitamin A equivalency units in the kale, the average person got twice as much from the fruit, even though there was twice as much in the kale. That means it was 4 times easier to get it from the fruit.
Right.
Joel Fuhrman, who I've known for 30 years, is out there telling people eat the most nutrient-dense foods possible. No, wrong. Eat the foods that contain the nutrients we need, but that the body can easily digest.
Yeah.
It should be only those things that our bodies can digest, because no animal eats things. It doesn't matter how many nutrients it has. No animal eats things the body can't digest. People are eating lots of things that we can't easily digest.
This brings me to one thing I meant to ask you earlier. Is how exactly, or what is your opinion? Because I know how you feel, but what's your opinion on the whole herbal tincture thing. A lot of vegans or raw vegans, people getting into fruitarianism, some of them are into that, and generally the defense is that some of these herbs, although they're not herbs we would necessarily eat as a meal or something, do contain some properties in its tinctured form that can alleviate or like affect certain organs or different parts of the body, different glands and stuff like that, in order to heal and detoxify ourselves.
Right. Well, I mean, so certainly part of what you just said, that these herbs contain certain compounds that can affect the body. You said that part first. Absolutely true. Now, can it make the body, can it heal the body? Can it cleanse the body? Absolutely not. Remember, these are biological processes and there's no exceptions to this. And of course, there's those people out there, yeah, I mean, but God gave us these herbs to heal. That's one particular salesman's line. God gave us these things to heal us. No, I don't think so. These are toxic compounds that can only suppress symptoms. That doesn't make us healthier. We feel better by suppressing symptoms, but are we actually healthier? No, we're not. And here's the interesting thing. When we take people here, we see clients here every year who've been using herbs, and sometimes they give up because they want to stop taking, they think, well, it's been 10 years, I'm going to stop taking it, or 5 years, I'm going to stop taking the herb. And what they find out, the original condition is still present. They've just been suppressing symptoms. And they fast, over and over. We see this over and over again. Or people give up because they're frustrated because it never eliminated all their symptoms. They spent hundreds of dollars per month in some cases or more, and the problem's still there. And then they fast 21 to 30 days and the problem disappears. So the body is self-healing.
Would you say it's accurate to say that for the people who have been taking a lot of the herbal tinctures, but have also been doing some fasting, like water fasting, or change their diet to a more fruit-based diet, and they have a lot of success, is it more than likely then the cause of that success is the water fasting or the massive change in diet?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, again, there's someone out there pushing herbs who is smart enough to tell people to eat a fruit-based diet. Why? Because no one would have any success with his products otherwise. I mean, if you're eating a normal diet and taking herbs, maybe you'd suppress some symptoms. You're not going to heal anything. The body is self-healing, and fasting gives it the optimal conditions to heal. But, again, because the body in every moment is attempting to heal, some people, if they drink juices, will heal. I don't think we should drink juices. Green juices are way too high in protein. Dark green leaves are 50% protein by calorie. When we concentrate and make a big glass of this, we're getting way too much protein. Fruit juices, by taking the fiber out, remember, we take the fiber out, what happens? Orange juice has 3 times the glycemic load of the orange. So fruit juices, carrot and beet juices all have a very high glycemic load. Green juices all have way too much protein. Eat the whole foods. Well, that's the best thing we can do. Right. But by lightening someone's diet, by lightening the burden that the digestive tract has to deal with, they might heal, because the body was always attached. As soon as we improve anything a little bit, the body should be able to heal better. But herbs aren't doing anything for us except suppressing symptoms.
Okay. You make some good points. I've wondered myself over the years, if maybe there's something to the herbs or not. I have thought at times like, well, I don't know, logically it seems like, there probably wouldn't be if we don't eat them, and otherwise how are we going to know they're good for us unless, a lot of people did it through trial and error and maybe hurt themselves over the centuries. I don't know.
Right. Well, in fact, a couple of things to consider when we talk about that. Notice that herbalists will give you a prescription. You can use this herb, but only a certain quantity per day, or only a certain number of days or weeks in a row. Why? Because it's toxic. You take, every medicinal herb is toxic. You don't have to trust me on this. You can Google it. You can look at any medicinal herb, do a search online, see what you find. There's toxicity with all of them. Mm-hmm. Okay. Remember too, drugs, where do you think the first drugs came from? Pharmaceuticals. Where did they come from?
Plants.
For herbs, exactly. And you could say plants. It could be, depend on what, aspirin salicylic acid comes from the bark of a tree. So it's not exactly an herb, I guess, although some people might call it that. In any case, drugs, which I think most of your listeners, I think you and I could agree, are all toxic to us. And that's a simple fact. If they came from the plants and they were toxic, then didn't that mean the plants were toxic too?
Yeah, you'd think so.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it does. Pretty sure it means that. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, what happens, whether it's drugs or herbs, any medicinal substance at all, anything that's considered medicinal, and today there's all kinds of things, ayahuasca, that's a plant medicine, people say.
Right, yeah.
Well, what all medicinal substances have in common is they're toxic substances that the body reacts to in a way that creates symptomatic relief. Healing is happening by the organism when we get out of its way. That's how we're going to heal the fastest. Anything that we take that theoretically heals us or is considered a medicinal substance, it's just suppressing symptoms. It's the body reacting to the toxicity in a way that gives us symptomatic relief.
And one thing we haven't touched on yet actually is vegetables. Most people will consider vegetables to be the almighty healthiest food on earth because it doesn't have all that scary sugar in it.
Right.
Do they think that just because it doesn't have all the scary sugar in it? Why do people think this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this is, again, we've been led to believe, A, that sugar is bad for us, B, that the things that are really good for us don't taste very good, right? The stuff that tastes good can't be good for us, where the stuff that doesn't taste good that's supposed to be good for us, that's vegetables. And we're told to eat our vegetables because they're good for us. Whereas, I don't know about you, but like in my house, I mean, there was no fruit meals. Fruit was dessert, was a snack, but it was never the meal. That's because it wasn't considered real food.
Yeah.
And it probably was because of the sugar. I mean, it's for whatever. I mean, I think it's because of all of that we've all been led to believe that vegetables are the powerhouses.
Yeah, I've had my own mother say to me often throughout the years, "Oh, Chad, when are you gonna eat some solid food? Some real food?" And I'm like, this is real food. Just because it has water content and fiber doesn't mean it's not real food. The problem is that you're eating too much food that is too solid, probably.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the bottom line is people are dehydrated because they're eating food that's low in water content. Eating a high water content diet might be one of the most important things we can do. But it's got to be the natural water because fruits and leafy greens have this perfect water. The structure of the water is different than here I'm drinking this amazing spring water, which comes up out of the ground right here on site. And it's good, but it's nothing like the water in our perfect foods.
That's what I was going to say. Aside from the fruit water, in your opinion, what's the best type of water somebody can get? Is it spring water?
Absolutely. Can't do any better than spring water.
So all the fancy Kangen machines and every other type of reverse osmosis and stuff doesn't stack up, you think?
No, not even close. Yeah. I mean, listen, we are never, ever going to improve on nature, no matter how hard we try.
Yeah.
It's never going to happen. I mean, people want to improve on nature, but it's never going to happen. It never has happened. It's never going to happen. No matter how hard we try, people want, coming back to the supplements, I mean, people want magic pills. People want to believe. I bought this machine, this gives me the best thing. They want to believe that, but it's not true. Distillation, first of all, takes out the electrolytes that we need in the water for the water to cross cell membranes and actually be absorbed by the body. It's a bad idea. Reverse osmosis is a little better if you're buying a typical home machine. The very best reverse osmosis filters and reverse osmosis filters, it's the size of the holes in the filter, the micron size. The very finest filters produce water that's actually more pure than distillation. And that water should never be consumed.
Yeah. And regarding fruit, you mentioned something I was going to ask earlier. The water in fruit, is it true that it's of a thinner molecular structure and it's more easily absorbed by our cells than regular water?
Yes, it's about the number of molecules clustered together. So in fruits and leafy greens, in plants, we're going to find water molecules like 5 to 6 molecules clustered together. So, imagine that you've got a whole bunch of these things clustered together. If you've got 5 or 6, that's what you're going to see. By the way, you can't find, you can't show me a water molecule. There's a bunch of them in here. and even one drop of water is at least 5 or 6 molecules clustered together. But typically, even the water coming up out of the ground, we're looking at 25 to 35 molecules clustered together. The more molecules clustered together, the harder it is for the body to break all those bonds so it can actually get to the molecule. When we eat the fruits, we're getting something that's only 5 to 6 molecules. The body has a much easier time actually absorbing and using that water.
So, what would you say would be, let's say, for somebody who is a healthy person, like a real health, and they're active. Let's say playing basketball,
Right.
like myself, or hiking a mountain,
Right.
a big mountain, up in the Rockies. How much fruit do you think, like high water content fruit, do you think they should consume compared to just water itself over the course of a given day, ratio wise?
Yeah. Well, that's a little hard to say because each situation is different. And it would depend on the circumstances. When you're talking about hiking, if you're hiking in the summertime and you're doing a lot of sweating, you want to be careful. The average person, when you sweat, you're losing electrolytes, you're losing sodium as well as other minerals. But again, I mean, the number one cause of problems for most people in terms of electrolyte imbalance is sodium. Hyponatremia, low sodium, can kill you. Low potassium and low chloride can do that too, but it's less likely. And one of the reasons it's less likely, especially in someone eating fruit, is because lots of fruits are loaded with potassium, not just bananas. Avocados, watermelon, papayas all have fair amounts of potassium, and lots of other things do too. Coconut water has plenty of potassium. Chloride and sodium are a little harder to come by, and so they tend to be more problematic. It's usually sodium first. But so, if in very hot, people get themselves in trouble, at the big marathons. There must be a Vancouver marathon, right?
Yep.
So, and it happens when? In the spring or the fall or the summer?
I don't know. I honestly don't even remember. Never paying attention to it. I just run up mountains around the basketball court.
Well, and they're probably smart enough to not do it in the hottest part of the summer. But in big marathons like the New York City Marathon, the Boston Marathon, these are big races, a lot of people. And they estimate, experts have estimated that somewhere between 20 and 25%, or maybe 15% of the people running wind up with hyponatremia, low sodium.
Wow.
It's not unusual to have 1 or 2 people actually die as a result of it. Although, most people are going to recover from it. They're going to get sick because their sodium drops low enough. And it drops low enough because they're running and sweating out sodium and drinking water that doesn't contain any. Okay. And so, in very hot conditions, you're far better off eating whole foods, fruits, than you are, which don't get, watermelon doesn't contain a lot of sodium, but it does have some.
So a related question to the, sorry if you weren't finished your thought, go ahead.
It's just that, if you're drinking a lot of plain water, people would say, well, that's why you want to drink something like Gatorade or sports drinks. The problem is they're full of crap, chemicals and artificial colors and all kinds of, that's garbage you don't want in your body. I wouldn't drink that stuff.
I was going to ask you, for somebody who's backpacking, let's say through the Canadian Rockies or anywhere really, for a couple days at a time, obviously you won't have the cream of the crop when it comes to fruit available on you, because that would be a lot to carry and it would go bad pretty fast. What would you recommend in those situations that somebody bring with them to eat?
This is a tough one. And again, honestly, I've been asked this before various times. If it's only a few days, it probably wouldn't be such a big deal. You're probably aware, I can't remember what they call these people or what, the method, but it's like ultralight camping, people who there's a term for those people.
Yeah.
Right?
Ultralight backpacking. It's
okay.
The term ultralight.
Okay. Right. So these are, for people that are listening that aren't familiar with this, these people don't wear these giant packs and frames. They carry them. They have small packs, very lightweight. They carry a minimum amount of gear. They don't carry anything that they're not absolutely sure they're going to need to have with them. It's just they minimize everything. What I would do is I would move in that direction, and I would, all the weight that I'm saving, I would carry in fresh fruit. You don't want to live on a bunch of dried fruit if you can avoid it. You can carry some dried fruit and or nuts and seeds, the two, because these are things that are relatively lightweight and relatively high in calories.
Yeah.
Because, with normal fruit, water is the primary component. Watermelons are heavy. They're 92% water. Imagine you took all the water out of watermelon, so had all the rest left over. You'd carry the same amount of food for a lot less weight, right? What I would do is I would carry as much fresh fruit as I could. I would carry some, and of course, I'd also look into, is there going to be on the way? I mean, is this a place where I'm going to be able to find that time of year some fresh persimmons or some fresh pawpaws or apples or cherries, depending on where I'm going and what time of year it is. Can I forage? You can probably find some green plants you can eat, but they tend to have almost no calories.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to sustain yourself while you're hiking, now for me, honestly, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Why not? Because my body's so efficient, I need very few calories to get by, and could easily go 2 days eating almost nothing. And so I would carry whatever fresh fruit I would normally need. It wouldn't be very much. I could carry that quantity. I would stick with things that are easy to transport. Papayas would be a terrible idea. They bruise very easily. Yeah. Melons are super heavy because of the high water content. I would focus on, I would try to start out well hydrated, which, you want to be hydrated anyway, but, I'd be in good shape to start with. I would focus on carrying apples or oranges, and things like that don't bruise so easily, that aren't going to be so badly beat up. And I could easily carry, I could easily live on a dozen apples and oranges, a dozen of each, for 3 days would be no problem. It's not a lot of food, but I'd be able to make it. And maybe I'd carry some dried fruits or some nuts and seeds just in case I felt like I needed to boost my caloric intake.
And I guess that would depend on how intense the hiking is, how many feet you're going up, and how many miles, obviously.
I'll give you an example of this. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
So you may be aware of the Las Cascadas project that I'm putting together here.
Actually,
have you heard me talk about that?
I may not be. I might have to catch up on some of the newer videos.
Okay. Yeah. So I actually started working on, 30 years ago, visioned creating an intentional community for like-minded people, and decided that I was going to do it here in the tropics. I decided I was going to move to the tropics a long time before I did. It took me quite a while to make the move. And 8 years ago, I started negotiating for a piece of land that is, you understand acres there or hectares?
Acres. Oh, are you talking about the place with the waterfall and all that? I might have seen it in one of your videos.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
409 acres with the 2 highest waterfalls in Central America. It's just down the road from us, and we bought it a month ago.
That's unbelievable.
Took 8 years to almost 7+ years to get to that point. We had to raise quite a bit of money, but that's only 409 acres. We currently have 1,800 acres that we either own or have under contract to own. And the goal is to create something that's 5,000 or more acres, to create a huge nature preserve to protect the land forever. The land will be owned by a 501c3 nonprofit foundation that's already been set up in the United States. It will actually be the owner of the land. It's not for my personal benefit. Then there's an intentional community where the community members, you and I, own our lots and the communal land together. And why did I bring this up? So a few years ago, I hired a young guy around 30, 32 maybe, who's a permaculture expert. And I'm actually a certified permaculture instructor, but I don't work in that field. I don't teach permaculture courses for a living or do permaculture projects. I'm a health coach and a fasting supervisor, and I run this business, and that keeps me pretty busy. So I hired him to come and take a look and give me his thoughts about where we should do what. And over the course of 2 days, we hiked 20 or more miles through, we covered a lot of ground, because again, we had 16, 17 farms, a lot of vertical. We have, it's more than 1,000 feet from the top to the bottom. we hiked in, we hiked back out, we crossed all this terrain, we went up another big hill to the top of this piece, and then we did this over the course of 2 days. And throughout the day, he carried a backpack with a bunch of fruit in it. He's also a fruit-based eater, but he carried a bunch of fruit with him, had a bunch of water with him. He's a little bit more than half my age. We did this hike together the whole time. I brought no food and no water and was perfectly fine.
That's pretty unbelievable. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. I mean, I ate when we got back,
Yeah, yeah.
but during the day, I consumed almost, I mean, I did take a little bit of water, but I consumed almost nothing.
It speaks volumes. It speaks volumes on the effects, long-term habits like you've had
Yeah,
can do.
it does. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, man, I'd like to see how your body, would react going up, I don't know, 4,000, 5,000 feet in a mountain up here, and I'm sure it would do phenomenal, as it would anywhere on the planet. But it would be so cool to just see that in person. Not that it's like a competition, but it is pretty
Yeah.
intriguing.
Well, to be honest with you, at this stage, I would probably need to train for that because I 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, I came home one night. It was between sessions, so we had no clients here. We were closed. My staff had left it. When we're open, we have staff here later into the evening, but everyone goes home at 6 o'clock or earlier when we're closed. They want to be home with their families. And so I came home. There was no one here. The front door was locked. My key broke off in the lock. And this is the rainy season. It's evening. It's raining. I'm in my shorts and flip-flops as always. I come around to here. I've got a walled garden, and I climb up onto the top of the wall. I'm about 3 meters. My hips about 3 meters off the ground. And as I turn around, I'm wearing these old flip-flops with no real tread on them, and I slip and I fall onto concrete 3 meters, break my right hip. And up until then, I've been running regularly. I don't do distance running, but I would run hill sprints. Actually created a serpentine trail, a gravel path specifically so I could run up it. And I was doing that daily, but I never got back. It's what happens. You get out of the practice, and then I got super busy. I mean, this past year has been crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I never got back to it. So if I was going to do that now, I would probably do some training first.
Yeah, of course.
Because my legs probably aren't, they're not as strong as they used to be. But
Try running backwards up those hills sometimes to get even more hamstring and glute activation.
I'll try that. Thank you. I'll give that a try.
Yeah,
I've never done a lot of backward running.
It's definitely a good workout.
Yeah, I'll bet it is.
By the way, I know we've been on here for a while now. If you have to go, no worries. Just let me know. And,
yeah, I probably should get going soon. I still have a few things I need to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've gone a little over 2 hours, 20 minutes, something like that. So that's phenomenal. Last thing I guess I'll ask you, is there anything off the top of your head that you haven't really ever covered much in your videos? And you've probably covered everything because you got a lot of videos. Any secrets about fruit? Anything you think or know about fruit that you usually don't mention, maybe like energetically or something? Like, I find it interesting how it seems like it's the only food on the planet where you could say it's karma free, like we're supposed to eat it. And
yeah, no, that's absolutely true. It is the only food on the planet that I know of that's karma free. It is, by the way, the original yogic diet. You mentioned practicing yoga. The original yogic diet was a fruit-based diet because yogis wanted to eat a karma-free diet. If you're eating vegetables, you're killing. I mean, vegetables are either roots, right, or it's the whole plant you're eating. You eat the vegetable, you're killing the plant. You eat fruit, the fruiting plant actually provides fruit as a vehicle to distribute seeds. The mango tree, the apple tree, the cherry tree want you to eat the fruit, and they want you to leave the seeds on the ground somewhere where they might have a chance of growing. So it's completely karma-free. You're actually helping. I mean, there might be some positive karma, but there's no karma, no negative karma. There's nothing I can think of that I haven't already shared at some point. I really, my objective has always been to share as much as I can. And so I think we're somewhere 750 videos on my YouTube channel, something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I mean, I just started my channel, so I don't have a big following yet, but I know you do. You've got a decent following. But for
yeah.
anybody who still might be listening to this in its podcast form, or even on the YouTube channel or the Rumble or BitChute channel, um, if you would remind us maybe what your channel is, and then also about your business in Costa Rica, if anybody's interested in water fasting with you.
Yeah, sure. And maybe you can provide links in the description here,
Yeah, I will.
in the text. But yeah, I mean, it's YouTube. Loren Lockman is my name. If you go to YouTube and put in Loren Lockman, I'll come up. Um, the center is the Tanglewood Wellness Center, and we turned 24 years old earlier in March, and as I mentioned, have guided many thousands of people through long fasts. Here we see amazing results over and over again. It's a beautiful place. It's an amazing place. We also have the Las Cascadas project we just talked about a few minutes ago. You can go to lascascadas.org. It's a nonprofit, so lascascadas.org. And one more, actually, one of the projects that we completed this year, I want to say about 10 weeks ago now, maybe 8 weeks ago, somewhere in there, we launched the Academy for Vibrant Living. I say we actually brought in a partner to help me with this because it was something I wanted to do but didn't have time to. So he put it together for me. It's based on my teachings. The first course is called Vibrant Health, and we recorded, I want to say 100 and some videos for that program. I'm not sure the exact number. We've had great reviews. We've got about 50 people taking the course now. And we have been, just this week, today, I think we recorded another 10 or 12 videos. We have a health coaching course, which goes live by the end of April. And if you're interested in the health coaching course, the Vibrant Health course, excuse me, is a prerequisite. You have to take that first. We don't want to just teach you to be a coach. We want first to teach you how to be as healthy as possible, and then teach you how to be a coach. So these projects and many others have kept me super busy. But you can go to academyforvibrantliving.com and check those programs out. We are still offering a discount because it's a new program. They will soon go to their normal prices, but we've gotten amazing feedback so far from the people that have taken the courses. So you might want to check that out.
Okay. Wow. That's great. That's a lot of good stuff. And I got to look more into that permaculture thing that you're building and have been working on, because that sounds
Yeah,
incredible. I mean, what an idea that is a lot of years into the making and stuff.
yeah, it's gonna
That's
be really
amazing.
amazing. I mean, we could probably spend a whole
Yeah.
session just talking about that sometime. And
Yeah.
we were
Yeah.
actually talking about
That
maybe
maybe,
having a
yeah.
token basketball player, just one.
Oh, nice. Well, yeah, I think I know somebody that might be able to fill that spot. For sure. Okay, well, thank
My
you very
pleasure,
much,
Chad.
Loren. You've been very, very, very generous with your time. And I started listening to you probably 5, 6 years ago. And I got to say, one reason is because you are very good at explaining yourself in detail, but also being
Mhm.
very clear and easy to understand for anybody listening.
Yeah, thank you. I
So,
appreciate the
excellent.
kind comments. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity to be
Yep.
here with you. I love
All right.
sharing this stuff with people. I hope you get a lot of people watching. But anyway, I'm glad to be here, and would be
Yep.
happy to come back sometime.
Okay,
My
great. Thank
pleasure.
you. I will catch you later. And for anybody listening, this is the Mystical Mountain Podcast. You can see all these mystical mountains behind me every episode. They're everywhere. And go check out Loren Lockman on YouTube and his website, the Tanglewood Wellness Center.
My
All right.
pleasure.
Thank you,
Take
Loren.
care. Bye bye.
Yeah, you too. Talk to you.